The anime kicks off with a masked guy who just finished defeating the demon god in a video game. Cue the dramatic music and probably a few broken controllers. Standing next to him is a blonde girl named Fieria. She congratulates him and calls him Sunraku. Sweet, right? Wrong. Sunraku, full of unresolved trauma and gamer rage, says he's waited a long time for this moment, and bam, he kicks her straight in the face. No hesitation, just boom. He yells at her to join the demon god in hell because she was the real villain all along. Oof, plot twist. And with that, he declares the game Fieria officially garbage, trash tier, uninstalled, and emotionally deleted. Now, fast forward to the future, where screen-based games are considered retro. Most kids these days play full immersion VR games, like Smell the Pixels level immersive. Enter our main guy, Rakuro Hizutome, who also is Sunraku in-game. Professional trash game connoisseur, his hobby, buying and playing the worst video games imaginable. He's like a human bug tester with PTSD. Cut to a school hallway. Rakuro's heading to Mahinoki High when a girl waits nervously in the corridor. She even practices a whole conversation in her head, hoping to impress him by talking about video games. But before she can say a word, some other dude swoops in and completely ignores her. Oof. He casually tells Rakuro he stayed up all night playing a game so bad it may have committed war crimes. He calls it the worst garbage ever. Meanwhile, across town, we meet Mana Imawaki, manager of a video game store called Rock Roll. She's prepping for the holiday rush. More kids, more games, more parental regret. Then Rei Saiga, yes, the same girl from school, shows up pretending to browse for new games. Mana sees right through her and says, "Girl, you're just here to stalk Rakuro, and that's okay." Mana reveals that Rakuro's been locked in his room for days playing the absolute worst game ever made. It had more bugs than a campground and frustrated players to the point they broke their VR headsets. Oh, and the final boss fight. You were forced to wear a swimsuit and a mask because apparently that was more efficient. Sure, Jan. Rakuro shows up at the store asking for another garbage game like it's a fine wine. Rei sees him and panics. Ninja vanish, disappearing into the shadows. Mana asks him how Fieria went. Rakuro says he hated every second, especially the blonde heroine. Whenever things got tough, she'd accidentally kill villagers and blame the demon god, and when he thought he'd finally earn a reward for all his hard work, nope, she just criticized him and refused to progress the story. The only joy he got was unlocking the final 3 minutes after the boss battle, just so he could beat her up for revenge. Gamer therapy. Rei, still blushing behind the shelves, overhears all of this. Since Rakuro has nothing left to play, Mana recommends a good game for once. One that's not total garbage. She figures if he knows what's bad, he'll appreciate what's good. She hands him a copy of Shangri-La Frontier, a top-tier VR game with over 30 million players. Also, yes, she's totally doing this so Rei can impress him later. Later at home, Rakuro reads the game's backstory. Apparently, it's about refugee spaceships escaping extinction. Now their descendants live on a medieval-like planet 1,000 years later. Cool lore, 1010 would skip cutscene. He sets up the game and logs in. The VR system was developed by Utopia Corp, a company founded by genius programmer Tsukuyo Tsukuri. They make the software, the hardware, and even the online services, basically. Apple if Apple didn't suck. Rakuro picks his character class, dual-wielding mercenary plus lucky vagabond. For gear, he sells everything except a bird mask to buy better weapons. Ends up half naked, out of embarrassment. He keeps the mask on, stylish and mysterious, kinda. He skips the intro and starts playing. He's dropped into a forest in the middle of nowhere. First order of business, parkour up a tree like a true gaming legend. His mini-map only shows 3 places, his location, the Forest of Madness, and the city of Firstia. Because he picked the Vagabond class, his spawn point is randomized RNG gods. Be nice. While exploring, he checks his stats. Just 3 vitality points. Basically 1 sneeze away from dying, but he's chill about it. Then, ambush, a goblin attacks, he dodges and one-shots it like a boss. Assumes early mobs are weak. Spoiler, they are. He levels up and gets the goblin's axe but decides not to use it because it's already falling apart. Suddenly, more rustling, another attack, this time from a rabbit with red eyes and murder vibes. He dodges again. The rabbit crashes into a tree, which collapses. Yep, this bunny hits like a truck. Rakuro doesn't panic. He watches its attack pattern, then lands a precise counterattack right to the chest. Boom, victory. He gains more XP and unlocks a flashy new skill. Flash counter. So far, no bugs, clean combat, smart mechanics. This game might actually be fun. Rakuro goes on a monster murdering spree. He farms XP, unlocks abilities, and reaches level 12. He even scores the rare Vorpal bunny daggers, despite only a 5% drop rate. Gamer luck activated. Right now, he only uses his stab attack because it's the least risky. He realizes he needs better loot and stronger enemies, but he's wandered too far. The closest city is Secondale, and he needs to cross a bridge to get there. At the bridge, he meets his first boss, the Great Ravenous Serpent. Most players fight it in teams of 3, but Rakuro, nope, he's soloing it. No armor, no backup, just pure gamer instinct and unresolved stress from trash games past. In a change of scene, we see a knight in armor arriving at the starting city of Firstia. The NPCs and other players are surprised when they see him, since he's wearing the emblem of a clan known for trying to fully complete the game, so they wonder what someone like that is doing in the beginner town. At that moment, we realize the armored player is actually Rei, who came to that city to look for Sunraku since it was the first place he should have visited, but what she doesn't know is that Rakuro had wandered too far into the forest and was already closer to the next city. Meanwhile, Sunraku is still fighting the boss. First, he analyzes the movements of the giant ravenous serpent, then he activates a skill called Light Step, which allows him to dodge all of its attacks and study its patterns. That's when he concludes its movements are predictable and that he can beat it without taking damage. But he knows that if he gets hit even once, it's over. He tries to injure it, but ends up breaking his sword, since its scales are way too hard. So he decides to use the blades he got from the rabbit, and just as he's about to use his thrust attack, the serpent spits a liquid at him, which he initially thinks is poop, but then realizes is poison and that he'll now lose 1 HP every 10 seconds, so he has to finish the fight in under 4 minutes. To do that, he needs to land critical hits, and in this game, crits aren't random. They trigger when you land a perfect strike or hit a vital spot, and since the serpent's scales are too tough, its only weak point is its head. He tries to go for it but realizes it's too hard, so he decides to create a weak spot by positioning himself near its tail. Then he uses his thrust skill and manages to pierce its scales. He takes the chance to land continuous blows, all of them critical, but he underestimates how much HP the serpent has, and it throws a hit at him, which he blocks just in time, but ends up getting launched into the air. That's when he realizes this game isn't as easy as the one he played before, and that he's really underestimated it, but even so, he doesn't give up, blocks a bite, and uses a skill called Flash Counter to free himself. He then grabs on and, activating his thrust attack, stabs the serpent in the eye, finally finishing it off. The system tells him he's gained 2 levels, now level 14, and he picks up the items, but notices he's still poisoned, so he decides to level up his resistance and agility to sprint to the next city and set a new respawn point at the city gate. At that moment, we see 2 players at the city gate, Reiji and Mia. The guy has convinced the girl he likes to play Shangri-La, and now he's acting like a seasoned player to impress her. He's super thankful to the game for the opportunity and tells her that in-game, it's better to use their nicknames rather than real names. Then Mia sees someone approaching fast and aims her bow, thinking it's a monster, but Reiji tells her it's a player, and that if she attacks, it'll count as a player kill, PK, and a skull will appear next to her name. At the same time, he assumes Rakuro is running because he's poisoned by the bridge serpent and points him to the inn, telling him he has to lie in a bed to set his new respawn point, so Rakuro quickly thanks him. Reiji then explains to Mia that a lot of players go through the same thing early on, and judging by Rakuro's appearance, he probably sold all his gear at the start too, which Mia finds cool, saying he really sounds like a veteran, and Reiji thanks Rakuro for giving him the chance to act like one. Sunraku makes it to the inn, rushes the NPC, and just barely touches the bed in time to set a new respawn point, and his HP hits 0, triggering a message saying all his stats will be temporarily reduced as a penalty. Back in the real world, Rakuro thinks that if the other player hadn't told him where the inn was, he wouldn't have made it, so he decides to thank him if they meet again, and mentions that he's really having fun. Then, he logs back into the game and starts exploring the city of Secondale, also known as the Swamp Expedition Town, and thinks to himself that he's serious about becoming a top player. But as soon as he sees people laughing at how he looks, the first thing he does is buy a new armor, something tough and resistant made from swamp frog hides. Then he checks out the weapon shop, but doesn't like anything the NPC shows him, so the NPC tells him that if he brings materials, he can craft better weapons. Without wasting time, Sunraku goes mining in the swampy desert, though he complains about how the mud slows him down. There, he fights a frog, and after 3 hours, returns to the NPC. The NPC is amazed by the amount of minerals he brings, and notices one rare material. Using that, he forges 2 special short swords that, after a critical hit, reduce durability loss by half. The NPC also explains that he can enhance his weapons later, and tells him to come back with more materials, but warns him not to go hunting at night, since monsters get more dangerous. Of course, as soon as night falls and the stat penalty ends, Rakuro ignores ignores the warning and goes hunting for better loot. Meanwhile, Rei is still looking for him and easily defeats the bridge serpent. She figures he must have cleared the beginner zone without dying, which she admits isn't easy, but she trusts Sunraku's skill and assumes he made it to Secondale. Back to Rakuro, we find him fighting a red-capped goblin, much more deadly than the ones in the forest. He quickly realizes the blacksmith wasn't joking. This goblin is way stronger, faster, and smarter than anything he faced before. But thanks to that, he's leveling up fast and learning new skills. The goblin calls in backup and they surround Rakuro, who gets excited, ready to go full beast mode. But just then, all the goblins get wiped out instantly. That's when he says he made contact with the real game. Standing before him is a special monster, Lycaon, the Twilight Nightmare. Meanwhile, in the game developer's office, we see a message on one of the screens, Shangri-La Frontier World History, and below that, Special Monsters Defeated, 0%. But it's marked as in progress, suggesting that depending on how Sunraku's next fight goes, that percentage might finally change. In a new scene, we see Rei running into Reiji and Mia, so she asks if they've seen a player named Sunraku. They tell her yes, they saw him running after being poisoned by the bridge serpent, and that he was wearing almost no clothes and had a bird mask on. Knowing where he is and what he looks like, she confirms that he managed to defeat the serpent without even going to the beginner village, which she finds impressive, so she thanks them for the info by giving them an item, and then takes off running at super speed. Before she leaves, Reiji catches a glimpse of a wolf emblem on her cape, which he recognizes as belonging to a clan currently tracking Lycaon, the special monster known as the Twilight Nightmare. Since Mia doesn't get any of this, he explains that special monsters are unique beings. There's only one of each, and because of that, many advanced players form clans with the sole goal of taking them down. There are rumors that there are 7 special monsters total, but no one really knows what the conditions are to make them appear, and the main issue is that they have absurd strength. In fact, ever since the game launched, no one's been able to beat a single one. Meanwhile, we cut back to Sunraku, who is face to face with Lycaon. He knows that just one hit from the beast is enough to take him out. It's way stronger than him, and he barely has any HP left. The fight begins. Lycaon lunges at him, but Rakuro blocks and counters, even laughs a bit, saying the special monster doesn't seem like a big deal, but deep down, he's just relieved that he leveled up and learned new skills. It was thanks to his perfect deflection ability that he managed to survive that first strike. He switches to the swords the blacksmith made for him and lands a few critical hits, but then the wolf vanishes as the full moon gets covered. Sunraku stays alert and dodges the surprise attack. The fight continues, and all he can really do is dodge and counter whenever there's an opening to deal a bit of damage. After a while, Rakuro realizes the wolf's fur is tougher than the giant serpent's scales. He's landed several critical blows, but they don't seem to be doing much, and his knives are already wearing down. That's when it hits him. There's no way he can win this with his current level, but even so, he refuses to give up and starts looking for a weak spot. He goes for the eye, but the wolf closes it and the attack bounces off. Lycaon roars, and the sound stuns him. Then the moon disappears behind the clouds, the wolf vanishes, and in the blink of an eye, Rakuro's legs are gone. Everything happened so fast, Sunraku didn't even see the attack. He has no idea what just happened, but somehow he's still alive, with exactly 1 HP, and he's certain no one is coming to save him. So, before dying, he tells Lycaon that he's incredibly strong, and that it's not because of a bug, he's strong because the devs designed him that way, meaning he's not invincible. Then he promises to come back and defeat him and asks Lycaon not to lose to anyone else before that happens. After that, the wolf finishes him off, and he respawns at the last save point. When he wakes up, the system tells him he's received Lycaon's curse. He checks the curse details. He can't equip gear over the scars it left. Weaker monsters will flee from him because of the curse. He'll get special conversations with NPCs. He gains high resistance to magic. And last but not least, the curse can be lifted either by receiving a saint's prayers or by defeating the one who cast it, Lycaon. This freaks Sunraku out. Now he can't wear proper armor. As he walks through the city, he shouts in the middle of the street that this kind of development is what makes this a trash game. But then he calms down and remembers the 3 virtues he learned from playing trash games: a persevering mind, a tolerant heart, and the ability to make cold, rational decisions. That's when he notices he gained a ton of experience from the fight with Lycaon. He's now level 28. Carefully, he starts allocating the 50 stat points he earned, but by the end, he notices that his vitality stat is still just 6, making him incredibly fragile. Out of the 4 gear slots he had, only 2 are usable now, and investing more points in vitality won't help. So he decides he'll have to make up for it with speed and endurance. His highest stat is luck, and he figures that must be why he managed to survive Lycaon's attack with just 1 HP pure luck. Just as he's thinking that, he yells out that he could really use some luck, and right then, a rabbit falls near the alley he's in. He wonders if it's a Vorpal rabbit, but notices it's wearing clothes and starts to think it might drop something good if he beats it, so he follows it. The rabbit walks to the end of the alley, opens a door, and walks through. The door says it's an invitation to the world of rabbits. That's when Rakuro remembers reading that Shangri-La has secret side quests, including hidden scenarios that appear randomly, and that many guilds are actively hunting for them. He assumes this has to be thanks to his high luck stat, and goes through the door. As the door closes, a system message appears saying the recommended level is 80, and he's only level 28. He arrives in Rabbitusa, the city of rabbits, and is blown away by the sight. The rabbit he followed starts talking and welcomes him. Turns out Rakuro is kind of a hot topic in the city. The rabbits are all proudly talking about how, even though he's weak, he faced off against Lycaon, used amazing technique, and landed a ton of critical hits without taking any damage. They say he represents the true Vorpal spirit, but Sunraku, staying humble, says that even so, he didn't actually manage to do anything to the wolf. The rabbit tells him that's only because Lycaon is way too powerful, a being that snacks on dragons, and the marks left on Rakuro's body prove that the Night Monarch doesn't see him as food, but as a worthy opponent. That's when Rakuro remembers the curse-mentioned special dialogues, so he figures that's why the rabbit knows about the fight. The rabbit introduces himself as Elim and says his father is the leader of the rabbits and that he wants to meet Rakuro. This worries Sunraku because he's killed a lot of rabbits, but Elim assures him his father isn't the vengeful type. He adds that plenty of humans have visited their city, but Rakuro is the first one ever to enter the palace. That gets Rakuro excited, but he's stunned when he sees the rabbit chief. He's way bigger than the rest and introduces himself as Vaisash. He says he's seen many humans lose their Vorpal spirit, but after hearing about Rakuro's fight with Lycaon, he believes there are exceptions and invites him in for a private talk. In a scene change, we see Rei approaching Mana's video game store to see if she's lucky enough to meet Rakuro, but Mana tells her that since they are already on vacation, she hasn't gone to the store anymore and probably spends all day playing. At the same time, she asks if Rei has encountered him in the game, and Rei says no, since she progressed without passing through the first city of the tutorial. And the manager laughs because she knows Rakuro has a lot of experience playing trash games. Thanks to that, he might open his own path and possibly discover a great special stage. And before Rei leaves, she encourages her and tells her she should confess once and for all. On the other hand, we see Rakuro investigating the special rabbit stage. There he realizes he must defeat the great rabbit-eating serpent, a monster that attacks his country. That way he can gain a magic called Vorpal Enchantment. He also realizes it's a stage that no other player has passed, since no one had met the boss Vaisash, and remembers what he told him, that if he agreed, he wouldn't mind training him properly, thanks to his Vorpal spirit. So Sunraku concludes it's a training mission, so kneeling before him, he accepts and calls him boss. Because of this, Vaisash stands up intimidatingly and seriously asks him how he just called him, and Sunraku thinks he said something he shouldn't have, but it turns out he likes being called that, and rather than treating him as a disciple, he will treat him like a younger brother and asks him to call him Vash, since only those he recognizes are allowed to call him that. After that, he tells Elim to help him with everything, so the bunny gets excited and tells him she wants to show him the palace, but Rakuro tells her he has been playing for many hours straight and would like to rest today. Besides, he wants to investigate that stage. Therefore, the bunny takes him to the local inn so Rakuro can update his respawn point, and before Vash leaves, he remembers something and puts on him the Vorpal Spirit necklace, which will give him 2.5 times more stats when leveling up, but at the same time reduces the experience he receives by half. Because of that, Rakuro wants to take it off, but he can't, since it can only be removed with Vash's permission, and Rakuro laments that they added another restriction to his game. However, Vash tells him that's how the weak become strong. Because of that, Sunraku thinks it certainly is an advantage to receive more stats, and from what he researched, he is the only one who has that item. Exiting the game, he checks the time and remembers he has a meeting with a companion, so he connects to a trash game called Berserk Online, which is a fighting game where fewer than 100 people enter daily, and it's a mystery how its server is still running. There he meets his companion, Modori Katsuo, who is another fan of trash games, and they start a battle where anything goes, even the use of bugs, since it turns out his companion is a pro gamer who develops new bugs to fight. Thanks to those cheats, Rakuro loses the duel and then tells him he's playing Shangri-La. At the same time, he gets excited and tells him about the 7 supreme bosses, of which only 4 are known so far, also that no one has defeated any of them, and he met one of them and completely destroyed it, which is why he's hooked on the game, because until he defeats the wolf, he won't be calm. Then Modori Katsuo considers playing it too, since she got curious about everything he said, and also tells him she is playing Shangri-La as well, since she sent him a message saying he had started playing too, and we see how the girl receives the mail while defeating other players. She is a player killer named Arthur Pencilgon at level 99 and says she will give Rakuro a warm welcome when she meets him. On the other hand, we see Rakuro exit through a teleportation portal and return to the alleys of Secondale, since while he's with Elim, he will have no problems traveling from the Rabbit Country. There he again feels how comfortable Shangri-La is, comparing it to trash games. At the same time, Elim asks why they left Rabatuza if there were still many things he hadn't seen, and it's because Rakuro worries that the city will fill up due to the holidays and wants to reach Third Rema, a pretty big city, because if there's an event, it will possibly take place there. Because of this, Elim offers to help and a window appears to be added to her group. He accepts, surprised that he can team up with an NPC, and is amazed to see all her stats are higher than his, except for speed, which just barely beats him, and he thinks that due to the mark Lycaon left on him, Elim is the compensation for the curse. Leaving the alley, some female players notice Elim and find her very cute, so they ask Sunraku how he tamed her, but Rakuro, not wanting more players to know about Rabatuza, leaves inventing an excuse, but one of them takes a photo to ask on the forum how to get a pet like her. Once outside the city, Rakuro wants to test the characteristic of his curse, that weaker monsters will flee from him, and casually encounters a monster that runs away when it sees him. Sunraku chases it and uses gravity to his advantage, finishing it off. And at the same time, he's amazed that the game could recreate those features in a surprisingly realistic way. Then he receives a strange compliment from Elim, who tells him she didn't know which of the two was the monster. After that, he puts his plan into action, which is to ignore the weak monsters and go only for the area bosses, so he arrives at the first one. But there is a problem. They are in a swamp. At that moment, Elim explains that the boss is a Cavalodo and is characterized by attacking from underground. It appears beneath the swamp, and the system recommends a team of 4 players to defeat it. And to make matters worse, since they are in the mud, it can only walk and the mud will gradually consume it. So it blocks his highest stat, which is agility, therefore it will be a difficult boss to beat. At that moment, Sunraku began to wonder how he would fight while in the swamp. The Cavalodo submerged itself, and Rakuro wondered how it could dive so deep when the swamp wasn't that deep. But then he remembered it was, after all, just a video game. The monster quickly approached and Elim got scared, so Rakuro told her to hold on tight and use the sliding movement skill, which let him dodge the attack while sliding. Then he drew his swords. He had gained that skill from the experience he got fighting Lycaon. However, he needed more than that to win, because the Cavalodo attacked again and was about to bite him, but Rakuro blocked it with the precise parry evolution, then performed a repelling counterattack. This skill allows him to counterattack right after blocking an attack. Thanks to this, Elim congratulated him, but it turned out he had to wait 10 seconds before using that skill again, and had no way to avoid attacks during that time. Then, the Cavalodo attacked again, but Elim pulled out a book and cast a spell that struck the Cavalodo, stopping it for a moment. Rakuro was surprised and remembered he wasn't fighting alone anymore, since he now had a companion, though as a player he didn't like depending on an NPC. Still, he didn't waste the opportunity and approached using acceleration, which gave him a temporary boost in attack power and agility. But he still moved very slowly, giving the Cavalodo time to recover before he got close. It attacked him again, but Rakuro repelled it with the evolved thrust strike, now called Spiral Cut. Thanks to this attack, he managed to damage it and took advantage to use Edge Climb, which allowed him to climb its body while piercing it with his weapons. Then he stood on its nose and asked Elim for help, so she cast the multiplication spell. The Cavalodo tried to shake him off, but Rakuro held firm and then jumped. The monster tried to bite him, but since the 10 seconds had passed, he used the repelling counterattack, and Elim also hit it with a stronger spell. After that, Rakuro fell and lost 8 health points from the fall, but praised Elim because she was doing very well. She complained about getting her clothes dirty. When they looked back, the Cavalodo was gone, and the ground started shaking. To make things worse, Rakuro couldn't move, and Elim warned him that the Cavalodo was about to attack again, so the only thing he could do was grab his companion and throw her far away. At that moment, the Cavalodo appeared and threw him into the air. We are then told that this boss has a shark's head, catfish whiskers, and is a 4-legged creature similar to a mole. It also has great strength, which it uses in its special attack, submerging underground, shaking the swamp to immobilize the player, then hitting someone at random to send them flying. Therefore, if someone goes alone, there is a 100% chance of receiving the attack, and it's almost certain they will lose all their health from falling from that height. That is why this boss is known as the Lone Killer. After that, Rakuro analyzed the situation and concluded that whoever programmed this boss must be a maniac, because no matter the player's skill, they will end up in that situation. While falling, he realized Elim was approaching as fast as she could, so he wondered if she would throw a magic blade but thought it wouldn't work. At the same time, he tried to find another solution like an item or skill that might help, but realized he had nothing and accepted that he was going to lose. He told himself he never got used to dying from falls in virtual reality, and even saw games banned for making the sensation too realistic. But just before he hit the ground, Elim used a magical teleportation scroll, and they appeared above the Cavalodo. We are then told about a skill called Meteor Fall, which uses the momentum of the fall to deal damage. Since Rakuro had a lot of kinetic energy from the fall when he was teleported, the game counted it as a double-edged attack, and it wasn't a meteor fall anymore but a fall by error. Still, thanks to the impact, Rakuro's luck activated. The Cavalodo was destroyed and he survived with 1 HP again. He then leveled up to level 29 and congratulated Elim for being the best companion. After that, they continued on their way. Rakuro ate medicinal herbs, which restored half of his HP. While heading to the city, he thought Elim was stronger than he had believed, and that it was he who depended on her in that battle. So, he accepted her help as a pet until he reached her level. Before reaching the city, Sunraku thought of a way to hide Elim, so what happened in the last city wouldn't happen again. Then she revealed her secret Vorpal bracelet, which is a secret item that Vorpal rabbits have, and asked him not to tell anyone. After that, she used metamorphosis and transformed into a girl. Because of this, Rakuro thought he believed he was playing a masterpiece, but now he doubted if it was one of those games where furries turn into cute girls. He stopped thinking about that when he saw Elim transform back into a rabbit, since the transformation tires her a lot and she can only keep it for 4 to 5 minutes. Rakuro mentioned that when they entered, he would look for an alley where she could regain her original form and recover. Upon arriving at the city of Thurdrama, the guards asked why he was wearing no clothes, and even thought bandits had robbed him. But Elim started explaining the battle she had with Lycaon, and how he was someone very famous. Thanks to that, the other players looked at Rakuro, and he noticed they were talking about him. Also, just as he was about to enter, he was stopped by a horned female player, who told him that from his appearance, she assumed he was Sunraku. We see her name is Animalia, but Rakuro didn't know who she was. It turns out that after the girls took the photo and posted it on a forum asking how to get a talking Vorpal rabbit, many players read it. Some were surprised because they knew talking monsters existed but had never seen a talking Vorpal rabbit. We see that the girl who stopped him saw the post, and seeing how cute Elim was surprised that players could tame animals other than dogs and cats. Other players commented that the photo was illegal since it was taken without permission, and even showed the player's name. Animalia decided to find him and discover how to get a rabbit like Elim, while other players noticed the marks on his body and wondered if they were tattoos. But it was strange, since when creating the character, there was no such option. They thought it might be a curse mark that doesn't allow him to equip gear, which brings both advantages and disadvantages. There were rumors that this mark was left by Lycaon. This caught a lot of attention because random encounters aren't rare, but the strange thing was that he had that curse mark. Then we see a player named Orsalot who suggests killing him and forcing him to confess when he responds. Many are surprised because he is the leader of a player-killer clan, so they worry about Rakuro. At the same time, another player sends a message to Rakuro, saying that if he sees a player with a wolf and a sword, he should talk to him. Apparently, they want to help him, as they think it's unfair that the information was shared without his consent, so their clan could support him. Because of this, Rakuro becomes famous, and more people get motivated to look for him. Meanwhile, Sunraku knows nothing about this. Back with Animalia, we see her ask how he managed to tame a Vorpal rabbit. Hearing this surprises him, and he wonders if the information spread when they saw him in Secondale, so he becomes cautious because he can't reveal the special stage, and also doesn't know how he started it. At that moment, Arthur attacks them, but they dodge, and he calls Rakuro the Revolutionary Knight, so Sunraku prepares to fight, and says that finally, he shows his face, calling her the Pencil Warrior. But she says he can't treat a beauty like her like a monster, and when she removes her mask, clarifies that in Shangri-La, she's not the Pencil Warrior and asks to be called Arthur Pencilgon. Rakuro notices she's level 99 and is a player killer. It turns out that Sunraku was called the Pencil Warrior because of his relationship with certain players of the Trash games. Here they explain about a Trash game called Unite Rounds, which is also known as the Game of the Trigger Thieves. Originally, the game was about becoming knights to save the kingdom from attacking monsters, being a cooperative MMO type. but the worldview was too realistic and it was very difficult to get items. Even when picking up stones to throw, they only had a 40% chance of getting one that was good to throw. Moreover, beginner player missions to gather medicinal plants lasted 12 hours and they might not find anything. As items leveled up, the difficulty of finding them also increased, so players decided to take the easy way. They took items from NPC shops and others attacked those who did this. That way they avoided spending hours searching, and this was the most normal thing in that game. In the middle of all that, someone used all violent means to take control of the kingdom, and that person was the Pencil Warrior, who promised to share the wealth and items with other players. Thus, the Pencil Kingdom was born. After this, we see Sunraku with the avatar of that game and his other player named Katsuo Tataki, walking and looting through the castle. While they do this, the boy wonders what they are doing, since supposedly in that game, they were supposed to defend the kingdom from monsters. But Rakuro asks if it wasn't to defeat the Pencil Warrior, since she was the true Dark Lady. Also different from the final boss of the story, since she intentionally exploited those who had not conquered and sent spies to create resistances on purpose, thus making the victims feel the desire to rebel and leave the game. During that time, all the players of the game were controlled by the dystopic Empress. When Sunraku and his companion reach her, we see that she is surprised because she didn't expect them to use the rebel army as bait to infiltrate. Moreover, they wanted to try to defeat her. Thanks to that, the Empress says she will remember their names and the battle begins. Returning to Shangri-La, Rakuro thinks there is a rivalry that unites him with her, since in their last fight no one won. So he prepares for a rematch. Elim steps aside and Rakuro worries about the level difference. Then Arthur approaches at great speed and attacks him, but he dodges. In the middle of the fight, he says he came from far away just to kill him even if he is penalized, so he should thank him. After that, he throws some poisonous knives, but Rakuro blocks them. Then the girl asks his level, but he doesn't answer, and assuming that he just defeated Cavalodo, she must be near level 30, and is surprised at how good he is at dodging. Sunraku responds that it's because they are in that game and can move easily. Meanwhile, Animalia recognizes Arthur as number 2 of the Ashura Kai, also known as the Giant Hunters. On the other hand, we see that Elim is running out of time to lose his transformation and his ears appear. Meanwhile, Rakuro asks why she is called Giant Hunter, and she answers that she only attacked high-level players, so they started calling her that. Although lately, due to the terrible new settings, it has become harder for her. Because of this, Sunraku mocks her because she was the giant they hunted in the other game, so they both laugh. But actually, she gets angry and attacks him, shouting she knows he shouldn't say that. Rakuro dodges and counterattacks while telling her he doesn't have a bird's brain and calls her a cow. At the same time, Arthur says he didn't come looking for him just for personal reasons. He has a message from his boss, the leader of the Ashura Kai clan, who wants him to tell everything he knows about the special monsters, or else he will keep coming after him until he talks. Because of this, Rakuro asks if they are threatening him and thinks what to do, since the equipment and level difference is huge. So he says it seems like they don't want him to enter the city, and he doesn't think attacking right at the gate was a coincidence, so he assumes it's not convenient for the player killer, PK clan, to attack inside the city, but she replies that it was just by preference. Also, she is sure he won't reach the gate. At the same time, we see Elim's tail coming out, and he is about to return to his original form, while on the other hand, Animalia is upset because she found him first, and when she looks at Elim, she wonders if she was wearing the tail and ears accessory, so she touches her calling her, and thanks to the scare, Elim transforms. So when she sees her in rabbit form, Animalia goes crazy at how cute she is. Because of this, Rakuro thinks of doing something, but Arthur takes advantage and attacks him distracted, but he uses the repel counterattack and then kicks her flying. After that, he calls Elim, and Animalia asks if she at least lets her take a photo with her, but Rakuro yells while fleeing that he will think about it if he survives that whole situation. Arthur, on his part, says he won't be able to run with that speed, but Animalia stops her and says if she puts the rabbit in danger, she will have to face her. Meanwhile, Sunraku is glad she helped them and thinks he only has to reach the city to teleport to Rabbituza. But right then, Arthur says she wasn't the only messenger, and Rakuro stops because of 4 PK players blocking the door. They complain about having to kill low-level since their karma increases too much. On his part, Arthur considers it an honor to fight the leader of the SFSO clan and says he will have to thank Rakuro for giving him that opportunity. The 4 PK attack Sunraku, and he annoyed says don't make that masterpiece turn into a trash game. Still, he accepts the challenge to fight the 4 and try to survive. Animalia attacks with 5 spells at once, but these are absorbed by Arthur and returned. Thanks to that, she is left with 8 HP, also poisoned, fatigued, and with reduced agility, so she asks how how he returned all her curses, and Arthur answers that there was a moment he was targeted by a shaman, and knowing how dangerous curses are, he always carries a powerful straw karma doll, which when squeezed, sends the curses back to whoever threw them. So he says she had no luck, but he will accompany her until her own poison kills her. Meanwhile, Sunraku keeps fighting, and after analyzing the situation, thinks of counterattacking. But at that moment, Rei arrives to the rescue and launches a cutting attack skill. Thanks to this, she completely finishes off one of the bandits with a single attack, and the others recognize her as Attack Master, who has the highest damage in the game. Because of this, Rakuro thinks he will have more problems, but Rei identifies Sunraku's nickname and gets very happy since they finally found each other. In a scene change, we see a small flashback where she was depressed because she couldn't find him. Previously, she tried playing the games he played, but it was too much for her, so she didn't want to miss this opportunity in Shangri-La, so she logged in to keep looking for him, but upon entering, she received a message from her sister asking her to stop looking for her friend and that she needs help finding a player, so she gives her the characteristics and nickname. Upon seeing that she leaves the city at high speed since she finally has a lead on him. Besides, she knows there are several clans behind him, even the bad Ashura Kai, so she thinks it's a unique opportunity, since if she saves him from the PK, she can get closer to him, and they will be able to talk inside the game, so someday she can hang out with him in real life. That's how she came to the rescue, while Arthur hears the noise of her attack and knows his 4 companions won't be able to defeat Rakuro, since after fighting him it became very clear that the skills he has gotten in the trash games are more valuable than any special item or parameter increase, so he will be useful. And apparently Katsuo also started playing and thinks if they are the 3 of them, he can make his plan come true. But turning to the shadow, he sees the player who arrived is Saiger Zero and thinks he not only caught Animalia's attention but also hers, and he is happy, but is stopped by Animalia, who tells him she hit 5 times and that the straw doll has incredible abilities, but a doll can only bounce back 5 curses, and asks if he will be able to avoid countering her trump card. In a scene change, we see a bit of Rei's past. She was drawn to Rakuro because he was always smiling and seemed to be having fun, so she started thinking about him all the time. Before she knew it, she was looking for him with her eyes, and that's when the store manager caught her. She's tried to talk to him for a long time, but never had any luck. She hopes to be able to speak with him someday, even if only inside the world of video games back in Shangri-La. After receiving her help, Rakuro notices her nickname and assumes she's not an ally of the PKs, but he thinks she's only helping because she wants to know about the special scenario and starts planning a way to escape. Meanwhile, Animalia explains to Arthur that her ace up the sleeve requires her HP to be in the single digits so she can create a curse that takes both her and her opponent down. Because of this, Arthur tries to stop her before she casts the curse, but he arrives too late. Animalia unleashes a curse called "Come with me to the beyond," and both die. Before disappearing, Arthur regrets having been overconfident. The flash catches everyone's attention, but Rakuro doesn't waste time. He asks Elim to prepare the portal, then runs along Saiger's sword and jumps, pushing off Saiger's head. In midair, he apologizes and jumps over the bandits, who try to stop him, but Saiger attacks and holds them back. Seeing this, Rakuro thinks he needs to remember Saiger's name, and he manages to enter the city. The bandits ask Rei why she's interfering, but she gets distracted by Rakuro's apology, and she's excited because he actually spoke to her. Taking advantage of this, the bandits attack her, but Rei easily eliminates them and says that if they hadn't been in the way, she could have talked more, so now she's going to get back at them. On the other hand, we see that Rakuro reached Rabatusa and admits he was scared because he didn't expect Elim to run out of magic and not be able to use the portal. She tells him she used all her magic on the transformation, and Rakuro is glad he bought a potion to recover magical power. At that moment, Rakuro receives a message from Arthur, who says that even though he was weak, he managed to escape and tries to excuse himself, saying his death was due to self-destruction, so technically he didn't lose and didn't expect Saiger to show up. He also says he wants to meet with him and Katsuo in the other game, but will give the date for the meeting later. Rakuro doesn't like this and suspects Arthur is plotting something. Just then, he receives a message from Katsuo, who says he just got an email from the Pencil Warrior that also gives him a bad feeling but sounds interesting, so he'll listen and urges Rakuro to accept as well. Sunraku ends up agreeing to the meeting. Meanwhile, Rakuro tells Elim that he's finally going to take the special scenario seriously, and she gets excited. After that, he asks what they're going to do because he remembers Vash mentioning something about training. Because of this, Elim takes him to the arena they use to train combat techniques, and once they arrive at the Vorpal Coliseum, Rakuro is amazed by its size. Elim tells him that her father ordered her to fight against 10 monsters, and she can only use Vorpal weapons. Rakuro understands he has to defeat them all and gets excited because he'll level up a lot, so he won't let Arthur mock him again. He asks to release the first monster. When the cage opens, Rakuro thinks he won't defeat all 10 monsters on the first try, but will try to learn their attack patterns to defeat them. However, he's surprised to see the opponents are a pack of monsters, averaging level 65. He asks for a moment because there are many level 65 monsters, but Elam says it's the first one, so it's normal. The monsters charge, and they quickly kill him. Meanwhile, Rei is happy because she managed to talk to Rakuro and remembers how he apologized for jumping over her. She thinks next time she'll gather the courage to send him a friend request and wonders if he'll accept it. Thanks to that, Rei imagines how she'd thank him for saving him, saying they'd go to school together every morning, and she starts screaming with excitement. At the same time, she wonders if Rakuro logged off because she searched the whole city but couldn't find him. She wonders what he's doing. On the other hand, Rakuro is struggling with his monster training. He's on his 7th attempt and is grateful that the death penalty is disabled in the arena. What annoys him isn't their level, but the number of monsters and how well coordinated they are, so he assumes there's an alpha leading them. He spots one away from the others and assumes it's the alpha, so he attacks and injures it. The alpha tries to escape and the other monsters try to stop it. But losing their leader breaks their coordination, and they can't stop it. Rakuro attacks the alpha multiple times, landing several critical hits, and defeats it. Now that the alpha is gone, the rest are easy, and he passes the first training test. He asks Elam if the next test will be against multiple monsters, but she says it's just one. When he sees it enter, he realizes it's a tentacled monster and thinks it'll be like fighting several enemies. However, he defeats it in 4 tries. The next monster is a berserk troll. Incredibly strong, but still a troll, so it only takes him 2 attempts. Then comes a boar with lots of endurance. But thanks to his rodeo skills from other games, he defeats it in 1 try. Next is a toxic eagle, which kills him more than 100 times, all with toxic waste attacks. That frustrates him, but on the 112th try, he finally defeats it. The next opponent is an easier worm, which he defeats on the first try, then a death panther, whose difficulty lies in figuring out how it attacks after stalking. Once he figures that out, the rest is easy, and he only takes 1 try. The 8th monster is neither very agile nor clumsy, just simply strong and takes him 2 tries. The 9th opponent is a robot, and the fight is more about dodging and attacking, taking 7 tries. This excites him because he only has 1 left. And he notices he only leveled up 2 levels, wondering if it's some kind of joke. He angrily blames the Vorpal collar. Elam asks if he's going to take a break because he looks tired, but he strangely says he's in the best shape and asks her to send the last monster. At that moment, Vash arrives, and Rakuro doesn't believe it's a coincidence. He assumes defeating the penultimate opponent brought him here. Vash says the last opponent will be one he personally caught, and he releases it into the arena, removing its seals. Rakuro wonders if it's human because it doesn't look like it and assumes it's some kind of mage. Vash tells him that a long time ago, there were fools who fused with trees to live longer, and this is one of them. He adds that at Rakuro's current level, he won't be able to defeat it, but since Vash sets the victory condition, Rakuro only needs to survive 5 minutes. Thus begins the special scenario against the last training monster called Aberrant Tree Mage. Sunraku believes it's a test of endurance and confidently asks if it's really just 5 minutes since he'll only have to evade it a little. But at that moment, he's attacked and barely manages to dodge. He's surprised the attack came without the monster making any movement. Then the monster summons many roots, and we see Sunraku screaming while dodging, while Vash comments he has no doubt Sunraku will survive but wants to see how he'll do it. At the same time, Rakuro realizes 5 minutes might be too long, and we learn that among the 30 million users of the game, Rakuro is the first to fight that monster, but that's something he'll discover later, and we see the monster's level, which is none other than 120. Continuing with the battle, we see that Rakuro dodges the monster's attacks, which relentlessly assault him without giving him a break. Thanks to this, Rakuro tries to get closer to hit it, but can't do any damage, and feels that his body is different. Moreover, the monster begins attacking him with chains, and while dodging them, he realizes physical attacks don't affect it. The monster keeps attacking, and Elam announces that 1 minute has passed while encouraging him, and Vash says he wants to see his Vorpal spirit. Meanwhile, Sunraku can barely survive since that monster is very lethal, attacking almost without moving using its roots, and when he dodges those, he also has to worry about the chains. Because of this, he doesn't even have time to think since dodging is a mental exercise. Vash gets excited watching the fight, while Rakuro mentions the most annoying thing is that it also attacks him with magic. And not only that, but over time, the variety of magical attacks increases, and it's programmed to raise the attack density, increasing the number of roots, chains, and the area of its magical attacks. Due to this, we see he has more difficulties, and it becomes harder to keep dodging so many attacks, so he thinks if the fight continues like this, the monster will defeat him before he lasts the 5 minutes. At that moment, the monster launches a stronger magical attack so powerful that Rakuro thinks he would have a better chance against Lycaon, but he's tired and not thinking clearly, so the best is to try after consuming some sugar and creating a strategy since there's no penalty if he dies and it doesn't matter. But just then he reacts and wonders why he assumes he's going to lose. That also happened when he fought the Cavalodo since he depended on Elim and gave up easily, so without realizing it, he was becoming weak and mediocre. So after reflecting, he runs through a route saying if he's consumed too many trash games, the cure is Shangri-La since it's a masterpiece, so he won't lose and won't give up, because it's inconceivable not to give his all in a game he hasn't fully cleared. Vash praises him for no longer just dodging and for approaching the monster, but wonders what he'll do next. So dodging a physical attack from the monster, he kicks its staff, takes it from its hands, and says that even if physical damage doesn't affect it, physical attacks do work. The monster tries to recover the staff with its chains, but Rakuro prevents it by throwing one of his weapons and tells the monster it depends too much on its precious staff, and judging by its desperate face, it won't be able to use magic anymore. At that moment, the monster intensifies its roots and chains, so Sonraku thinks thanks to other games, he became an expert at stealing weapons. With that move, he surprises Vash, but Vash says 2 minutes remain, so it's too early to celebrate, seeing the increase in attacks. Rakuro wonders if the monster got furious because it lost its staff, so he continues dodging the monster's attacks, which chases him to take the staff. Then, Elim cheers him and informs him only 1 minute remains, while Rakuro thinks he can't lose after getting this far. But the monster places a root wall in front of him, then grabs his leg with a chain and causes 3 negative effects: weakness, fatigue, and reduced agility. There he realizes the monster is so powerful it ignores Lycaon's curse. But when about to receive a root strike, he thinks with those negative states, he won't evade it in time, so he shouts if it wants the staff back so much, it should come get it and throws it into the air. Thanks to that, the monster goes after the staff, and when it finally catches it, Rakuro mocks it, calling it a fool. Because if it hadn't gone for the staff and he had hit it, he would have won. But then time runs out, and Rakuro expects everything to stop, but the monster attacks again. So Rakuro asks what's going on since the 5 minutes are up, but Vash interferes, saying it was just a rule they made up, so he finishes off the monster and declares victory. At the same time, he admits Rakuro did show his Vorpal spirit, but Rakuro, surprised, wonders how he won since physical attacks were supposed to be useless against that monster. After this, Elim celebrates her friend's victory, and Vash explains the monster existed thanks to the staff, and without it, it's just a walking tree. So he realizes that's why it started attacking desperately and asks Vash if Rakuro met the requirements. Vash says yes, and as a reward names him an honorary citizen of Rabatuza. Rakuro feels disappointed because he wanted a rare item, but Elim says it's a very distinguished title. At the same time, Vash removes the collar he had put on Rakuro and says he won't need it anymore. Then a window appears telling him he completed the special scenario, and he receives an invitation to the Rabbit Country. Then another window asks if he will start the special EX scenario, the Vorpal Epic, but he shouts that he wanted a rare item. After that, he logs off the game at 2 a.m. and falls asleep quickly. The next day, he reads about the new scenario and says he doesn't understand it, and that they recommend at least level 80. The scenario talks about the Age of the Gods, and he researched on forums that it was a civilization that disappeared long ago, but many lore analysis pages appeared, so he doesn't finish reading and decides to leave that special scenario for later, since the best thing is to explore the city and prepare to go to the next area. Then Elim asks if they're leaving soon, and that reminds him that if PKs and other players see him, they'll definitely want information about Elim. Also, not being able to equip anything to change his appearance bothers him a lot. Because of this, Elim suggests covering his whole body, and she knows the perfect place for that, so she takes him there where they meet Peets, who calls Elim Big Sister. He tells Rakuro they also sell in other cities, but rarely, since he has to become human, then calls him Birdman, but Rakuro clarifies it's just a mask and shows his real face. Elim is amazed not by his appearance, but because she thought he had a reason to wear it and wouldn't take it off easily. Then she asks Peets about an interesting fabric she had mentioned, and he searches in his bag, saying he thought he wouldn't sell it. After that, Rakuro goes out to buy a map of Third Rema City while disguised as a ghost, which bothers him because he thinks the outfit is silly. Then Elim asks him to hold out until they leave the city while she drinks a mana bottle to maintain her human form longer. Then he studies the map, seeing there are 3 areas to advance to: the Prism Forest Cave, the Death Caldera Crater which leads to Favel, and the Divine Steel Ruins that lead to Sixenvelt. Elim recommends the Death Caldera Crater, but he says they'll go to the Prism Forest route first. and while explaining his reason, Elim notices someone following them she had seen before. When Rakuro turns and sees Saiger Zero spying on them from a corner, he gets scared. In a scene change, we see on a ship the leader of the Ashura Kai clan named Orsalot, who scolds the other members for failing to catch Rakuro. They excuse themselves saying it was because Saiger Zero arrived, but the leader says it was obvious he would come, and Arthur tells him that then he should have gone. But the leader says he has important things to do and continues saying that there's no doubt the rabbit has something to do with something special, so they must extract the information by threats or whatever means, but they have to do it. Therefore, Arthur responds that it's fine, but tells him his guild should focus first on the special monster, and the leader says they already discussed it, since special monsters are not made to be defeated. Also, they don't know how to make them appear, so another comments that if they fight face to face they would only waste items, and another says they wouldn't get anything by trying to defeat it. Because of that, she gets disappointed and thinks they are failures. So she decides to leave. But before leaving, the leader says he's not done talking yet, but she replies she also has important matters, and he gets annoyed. Once outside, she thinks that in the past, the guild had more dignity as PKs. But since an update that gave PKs many disadvantages, they changed a lot. Now they only avoid danger, and she knows that way they can't beat him, since in that battle winning or losing will be a big risk. And she tells herself that she will be the one to eliminate Wazerman, the Tomb Guardian, who is one of the 7 Supremes. Then we see memories of her in front of a tomb with the name Setsuna Amatsuki, who apparently was someone important to her. Returning to Rakuro, we see he thinks Saiger is coming for revenge because he used him to escape the previous fight against bandits, so he decides to run through the city. This catches the attention of 2 Ashura Kai members who, upon seeing his name, realize it's Sunraku and decide to follow him. He runs on the rooftops while Saiger pursues and tells Elim they will go straight to the next area, while the PK players say he's heading to the steel ruins of the Divine and warn others to ambush him. While running, Ellie asks if he's not taking the wrong path since he said they would go to the Prism Forest but are heading to the ruins. But Rakuro tells her to calm down because it's a trap to mislead their pursuers. And we see the plan works because they're waiting for him at the ruins gate, and he tells Elim that Arthur taught him that. Then they arrive at the gate that will take them to the Prism Forest, but Saiger appears behind it, which scares Rakuro, and while raising his hand he thinks it's over. But Saiger only wanted to send a friend request. She also bows, and in a low voice asks if he wants to be her friend. Because of this, Rakuro realizes it's a woman and thinks it's all a trap, since it doesn't make sense to send a friend request, or maybe she wants him to share info about the special scenarios. He also thinks she's very observant since she didn't get tricked, but since he's dealt with cunning people in many games, he accepts the challenge and presses the button to approve the friend request. Because of this, Rei becomes very happy, and here we realize she actually lost sight of him and found him by a hunch. Then she offers to help him pass the game since they are friends, but Sunraku thinks it's part of her plan and politely declines the offer, saying he doesn't want a high-level player helping him. She says he's right and apologizes for proposing something that would take the fun out of his game and encourages him to keep striving to conquer the game. Then Rakuro apologizes for using her to escape, and she says it's okay and hopes they can play together another time. After this, they say goodbye, and Rakuro thinks he got rid of her too easily, and maybe it was all his imagination, while Rei, on her side, thinks Elim was an NPC since she didn't have a name above her head. But she doesn't mind since she accepted to be his friend, and at that moment the bandits arrive at the correct gate, but seeing Rei decide to leave that side for later, and she is just happy because she finally got to talk to Sunraku. Speaking of him, we see that once he leaves the city, he takes off the disguise, and Elim returns to her normal form. Upon arriving at the Prism Forest, they see many insect-type monsters. This catches Rakuro's attention, and he decides to go after some butterflies carrying sap to farm something and make money. However, at first attempt he fails, but eventually succeeds without damaging the item. The description says it's nectar that is hard to get but susceptible to impacts. Elim congratulates him and stores it in her inventory. Then he says he wants to go for the area boss. After that, they go for some mantises hiding in plants, so he pulls out a throwing knife which surprises Elim, but he says he bought it since he could only fight at close range, and the fight against the Colosseum Eagle left him traumatized. So he throws it at the mantis, which appears, and he takes advantage to finish it with his spiral cut skill. Elim keeps congratulating him and says he has gotten many items. He is also happy, but there's a monster he hasn't defeated yet, and it's that very big beetle. Luckily, it's in the Imperial Bees territory, which they don't like, and the Queen sends them to face it, but they are no match for him. And while this happens, Rakuro narrates the whole fight. The beetle already has its shell pierced, so it unfolds its wings and throws itself at the queen, defeating her. Thanks to that, the other bees and their queens scatter, and the beetle keeps eating but then notices it's being watched and starts chasing them while fleeing. Rakuro says he only wanted to pick up the items left by the bees, but Elim says maybe it thought he would take the sap, which reminds him of the sap he stored earlier, so he takes it and throws it on a mantis, so the beetle attacks it, and Rakuro takes advantage to hit the beetle with several critical strikes. After defeating it, we see it drops 4 items, so he says it's enough collecting materials. As he moves on, Elim says he cheated, but he tells her that in the game the fittest survive, and the story is written by the victors. Then he sees some cobwebs and asks Elim if the area boss wasn't a spider. She answers yes, and that it's called the clown spider. So upon seeing the cobwebs, he realizes the lair is nearby, and after following it, they reach a cave. Rakuro says it's time and jumps in without thinking. Inside, we see why it's called the clown spider in a scene change. Elsewhere, we learn that Arthur in the real world is named Towa Amane and is a famous model since people think she's an angel or the goddess of beauty, but when she logs into Shangri-La, she transforms into a PK, and that's her true nature. In a change of scene, we see that a group of players is about to face the spider, but as soon as they enter the cave, the boy steps on a spider web and gets stuck, while one of his companions tells them to look up, and the 3 scream, scared when they see the boss. Rakuro, on his side, upon arriving at the cave, cannot enter, since there are already other players fighting the boss, and then he observes how the boy falls, who angrily shouts that he can still beat him up, but is crushed by a giant rock. Rakuro laments, but seeing that he can now enter changes his attitude, although he worries a bit, since if he dies he will respawn in the last city. Once he enters, we see that he already has a strategy upon seeing the red one that crushed the player. There we also see that the corpses of his companions are wrapped in webs. Therefore, before starting to fight, Rakuro tells Elim to practice his battle narration in a corner, since he plans to defeat the spider without taking any damage. But Elim asks if he is sure, and he confirms that yes. Then he starts climbing quickly up the walls. At the same time, he realizes that the higher he climbs, the denser the webs become, and he plans to use the skills he obtained in the Colosseum. Upon seeing that the spider throws a rock at him, he uses a jumping skill to dodge it and continues jumping between the walls, saying he had seen that attack before. Then he starts grabbing onto the webs and does not get stuck, since it turns out the vertical threads of the web are not sticky. And seeing a large number of rocks falling, he uses the Acceleration 6 skill and keeps climbing on the webs while dodging. Upon reaching in front of the boss, he says that the time for throwing rocks is over and uses the Circular Cut skill to cut one of its legs, then continues with the Avalanche of Cut skill, and after so many hits, the boss falls. So he thinks he will take a good amount of damage from the fall. However, the spider throws its web to hold on to the walls, but he throws his throwing knife at the web and thus prevents it from holding on. Elim on her side dodges the spider's fall, but Rakuro knows that won't be enough to defeat it, so he gets an idea upon seeing all the things up there. So he starts cutting the webs and everything falls on top. Elim, watching the battle, gets excited, since if he continues like that, he will defeat it without taking any damage. After this, he comes down and faces it. Moreover, seeing its clown-like form reminds him of Lycaon, and thinks that if he can't defeat a simple boss face to face, he won't have a chance against Lycaon, and after hitting several critical blows, he manages to defeat it. Elim gets excited, and he tells her he took no damage just as he said, but still he is not completely satisfied. Then he receives a message from the Pencil Warrior, where they arrange the meeting to strengthen friendship ties, since the 3 are playing Shangri-La, and we see Katsuo, who is reading the message after easily finishing the Cavalodo. Katsuo comments that he started playing because Rakuro did, and we also realize that his in-game name is Oikatsuo, but we will keep calling him Katsuo. On the other hand, we see that in the real world, Rei tells Mana that she is now friends with Rakuro. She is happy and tells her he hasn't gone to the store those days, so she assumes he must be totally immersed in the game, so it wouldn't surprise her if he were the first to defeat a special monster. Rei thinks the same. Then when she returns home, she notices that Rakuro is in a store reading a video game magazine and hides instinctively. In that magazine, she finds an interview with Katsuo, since it turns out her friend is a pro player. At the same time, she sees the game update that will include the Split Sea, the colonizing fleet, and a new continent, apart from a new occupation, and remembers that Arthur talked about this the day before. From now on, we will call her Towa. It turns out that the day before they met, and in that meeting, they remembered old times when they defeated Towa. So she gets annoyed and interrupts them, going straight to the point and telling them she wants to form a team to defeat the special boss, Wazermon, the Tomb Guardian, so both are surprised and Katsuo gets excited since it is of the same category as Lycaon. Therefore, Towa stresses that there are only 7 supreme monsters in Shangri-La, and Wazermon is one of them. However, Rakuro does not understand why she invites them and not the high-level players, so he asks if only the 3 of them have the chance to defeat him, and she answers that it is not an opponent that can be defeated just with numbers, since the top 15 of Ashura Kai tried but got beaten up, so they assume it is one of the bosses that increases its attack resistance the more enemies it has, and she confirms that is one of the factors, but won't say more until they accept her proposal, besides telling them they will only have one chance, and it will be on the night of the new moon after the big game update, which will be in 2 weeks. After this, they ask Rakuro what he thinks, and he still has doubts, since both are low level and he doesn't understand why she invites them, but she answers that level is not a big problem. What they need are the best player skills, and that's why she needs him and the pro gamer Katsuo. At the same time, she tells them that for their help, they will have some extra reward, so Sunraku says he understands the matter now, but knows she is still hiding something, and if she wants them to bite the bait, she must tell the truth. Therefore, she begins explaining the operation details, but we don't get to know them since the scene changes to the present. Leaving the store, Rei gathers courage to talk to him, but Rakuro doesn't remember her name, only knows she was his teammate last year, so risking it, he says her last name and gets it right. She says it's a coincidence to meet there, and seeing him assumes he was shopping and tells him she is on her way to practice judo. Then she changes the subject, saying that Mana, the video game store manager, told her he plays Shangri-La, and since she also plays, if he doesn't mind, they could play together. But at that moment, he receives a message and apologizes. It's from Towa, who tells him to hurry up, so he apologizes to Rei and says a friend is rushing him and leaves. She on her side is happy since they talked a lot, and assumes because of the large amount of energy drinks she carried, he will surely spend a lot of time in the game and has the feeling they will see each other soon. Then she remembers she has to go to judo classes and leaves. Arriving home, Rakuro thinks he should have asked Rei for her nickname, but leaves that aside and enters the game. There he is greeted by Elim, who was waiting for him to connect and asks excited what they will do. And Rakuro tells her that in 2 weeks he will go fight Wazermon, so he will have to remove her from the group. And Elim is surprised, opens a door to Rabatuza and runs to inform her father. Rakuro on his side remembers that in the meeting with Towa, he mentioned he was making a group with an NPC, so Towa asks if it is the bunny and recommends that if he really cares about her, he should not take her, since in Shangri-La, when an NPC dies, they never appear again. After Elim ran off to tell her father that Rakuro plans to fight Wazermon, he meets with Vash, who tells him he wants to hear from him directly if it's true that he will fight the living dead, referring to Wazermon. Rakuro, before answering, thinks that this Rabatuza event started suddenly and without a doubt it's important, so the best thing is to assume his role acting according to the world's setting and characters, and he thinks that if it goes well, he might get important information about Wazermon. At that moment, Vash tells him he's still weak, and Rakuro knows that but comments he's not going to try it because he's sure he can win, as he'll only serve as support since the main actress will be a friend of his, and he asks if Vash can fill him in on everything related to Wazermon. Vash replies no, since the last time he saw him was a long time ago, and Rakuro says that according to his friend, Wazermon is being used as a tool by a PK gang to take advantage of him, and just meeting him gets a lot of experience points. Also, the one who planned the operation is a member of that clan, but she's the only one who truly wants to defeat Wazermon seriously, and that's why he will do everything he can to help her. Vash tells him it's still a stupid plan, and that he doesn't remember saying going to seek death was like the Vorpal spirit, but Rakuro replies none of them, especially himself, will try expecting to lose, as they were simply inspired by their friend's desire to win at all costs, and they only have one chance, because whether they win or lose, it will be the only and last time. But not helping after she asked would break their code of honor, or at least that's what he believes. He knows he's still weak, but has 2 weeks and swears he'll be ready in time. He knows it sounds arrogant, but he wants to gain the courage to face the strongest. Because of this, Vash tells him, Wazermon used to be very stubborn and saw everything in black and white, but because of a stupid lie, he lost his wife and now has a body that cannot die. He is a living corpse who cannot end his misery, and the best thing would be for someone to help him so he can rest in peace. For their part, they swore not to get involved with that at all, but if he decides to do it, they won't stop him, and Elim also asked him, so he tells him to follow her, since it's okay if they just offer a bit of help. After this, they arrive at a smithy, and Rakuro is happy. Then the boss calls one of his daughters named Bilak. Thanks to that, Rakuro wonders if all the rabbits of Rabatuza are Vash's children. After this, he introduces himself to her, and she tells him he has eyes very similar to Avel's, so Sunraku wonders if she's another rabbit, as he finds it hard to remember so many names. At that moment, Vash asks to see his Vorpal weapons, and upon seeing them, says that his weapons have accepted him as their master, and that will be enough to start, so he tells Bilak he will give them their true form. She's surprised, and asks if he's serious, since he hasn't lifted the smith's hammer in a long time, and he replies he won't rest while they go face Wazermon, so Bilak gets excited and fires up the furnace. Then Vash asks Rakuro if he has any good materials handy, like from a monster that was hard to defeat, so Rakuro looks in his inventory and gives him the beetle shell, and he prepares to work. Bilak tells Sunraku he's very lucky since his dad hasn't lifted the hammer in years, and Elim says he's a master smith, but not just any smith, since those who master the art get the title of master craftsman, and those who forge weapons from the era of gods get the title of wise craftsman, and those who master both paths are called divine craftsmen, and few reach that level. After this, Vash takes the knife from the furnace and starts hammering it, and we see magical circles appear, and with each hit the circles enter the weapon, since for the true form, memories and experiences the weapon had in battle are taken. Thanks to this, he wonders what kind of weapon will come out of his experience fighting Lycaon. At that moment, Vash begins to sing and continues hammering and singing until the Vorpal knives get another name and form. One is called Crescent Lunar Steel and the other Waning Lunar Steel. Vash comments that both fulfill their purpose for the first time when together, so Rakuro gets excited and inspects them. Crescent Moon in combat against a higher level opponent, upon a successful critical hit, consumes HP but grants a strength bonus on the next attack, and the Waning recovers HP under the same conditions. And at the end of the set description it says the fusion bar accumulates as a certain number of critical hits are landed, and he shouts excitedly because the weapons fuse. But when he tries to equip them, the system tells him he can't, since he doesn't meet the required parameters, and seeing the numbers he needs, calculates and realizes he must reach level 50, so he ends up disappointed since he wanted to try them immediately. Then we see him go to the tavern and apologize for being late to the meeting with Towa and Katsuo. They reprimand him because they've been waiting almost 3 hours, and Katsuo says he won't forgive him easily. But to calm things down, he tells them he found out more about Wezermon in his special scenario. So upon hearing this, Towa says she forgives him if he tells everything, and once he does, they analyze that it's an undead type monster. Then Towa realizes, remembering battles against him, that his movements were slow, and she thought he was a cyborg type. But now everything makes more sense. Then she says she must check something immediately, and maybe she'll join them again tonight. Before leaving, Rakuro asks what they will do meanwhile, and she says she'll leave them some things and that they should go to the Steel Ruins. Then she gives them a map and a fishing rod and says they'll understand when they get there. As she leaves, she sees Elim hanging from his neck and asks about it. But Rakuro pretends saying it's the latest fashion trend, and Katsuo doesn't know what they're talking about. After she leaves, Rakuro tells Katsuo to wait until he finds the safest route to the gate. At that moment, Elim whispers that her ears are tired, but Rakuro plays dumb and Katsuo shouts surprised. Then Elim can't hold on anymore and lets go. Tired, Katsuo asks if she's the NPC from the special scenario he mentioned. He grabs her like a plushie and says he also wants something special, and then they go to the Steel Ruins of the Divine. In a scene change, they remember their meeting with Towa, where she told them about the problems facing Wezermon, who at the start of the battle activates an ability that makes the maximum level become 50, and therefore higher level equipment cannot be used, so she told them that level wasn't so important with that boss. Even so, he is level 200, and that's why the player's skill is key, but although level isn't so important, they should still level up to 50, and that's why she told them to go to that place. The map she left had instructions about a hidden area inside the dungeon. Upon entering, they realize it looks like another game, and Rakuro says it's fun to see those floating objects that cause bugs. But Katsuo tells him not to see everything as trash games, since that scenery reminds him of the last boss in Brave Galaxy Fighters, though Rakuro didn't know what game that was. Changing the subject, he asks what level he is, and Katsuo answers that he is level 25, so Rakuro mocks him by bragging that he's level 31. But Katsuo tells him the difference isn't that big, and then Elim warns them about a red triangle falling. Katsuo says he'll handle it and tells her not to get involved. Then he ignites his fists, uses a counterattack ability, and defeats it in one hit. After this, Rakuro asks if that red aura gives a buff, and Katsuo says yes. It increases strength and vitality. Then more enemies appear, and Katsuo takes care of them. He tells them his class is the Spirit Fist Monk. Therefore, he can't equip weapons, but his stats go up instead, and he throws very strong punches. He also focused on HP and vitality to become a light fighter. Because of this, Sunraku thinks his setup is focused on taking some damage, which is a pro-gamer thought, just like Katsuo. Rakuro is about to tell him his setup, but Katsuo tells him not to, because knowing him, he specialized in strength and agility and has weak defense. But Sunraku says he's wrong, that he's a lucky fighter specializing in agility and luck. Katsuo criticizes him for low defense, but Elim says it's to push the Vorpal spirit to the max, though she doesn't know what that means, and they keep moving forward. They realize things are getting complicated, and as they advance, Rakuro respects the player who discovered the hidden place, but Katsuo tells him it was Towa who found it, exactly as they expected from her. They reach a point where they must jump, but there is a void, and they suspect it might be a trap from Towa to tease them. Still, Katsuo decides to go first, since Rakuro has less defense, and seeing him jump, Elim comments that he is a very good, strong, and brave girl. But Rakuro says he is a man and tries to explain that in real life he is, but it's complicated. So instead, he says he has a female appearance, but the spirit of a man. This surprises Elim completely. Then Katsuo tells him to hurry and not be a coward. So Rakuro gets annoyed, grabs Elim, and jumps into the void. Once they reach the hidden area, they must fish for the lake serpent of the vital currents, which grants good experience. Both start fishing and compete to see who catches more. Rakuro quickly bites something and says it's because his dad takes him fishing, and thanks to that he knows some tricks, but Katsuo knows it's a lie and really it's luck. Rakuro catches a salmon and Katsuo also bites something. Rakuro thinks it's another salmon, but Elim calls out that it's the serpent, so they prepare to fight. Rakuro tells them he will show his new weapon, but Katsuo asks if he shouldn't be level 50 to equip it. Rakuro pulls out other swords called Twin Swords of the Imperial Bees. Elim comments they are the work of his sister and recalls she made them with materials from the Imperial Queen Bee, and they turned out fabulous. Belak tells them the right sword has a special property, and then we see Rakuro attack the serpent with it. Katsuo asks if the scales aren't too hard, and Rakuro notices a mark it left. He thinks some monster attacks have destructive properties that can destroy parts of the body, which is an annoying property. Belak says the sword's effect isn't a common destructive property, but a corrosive poison attribute that infects the part to then destroy it, which she calls corrosive poison. Back to the battle, the poison causes damage over time, and if used multiple times, the corrosive poison effect breaks the enemy's resistance, speeding up the destructive effect. Rakuro shouts to Katsuo that he already removed one scale, so Katsuo takes advantage and attacks with critical hits. Seeing this, Elim moves to join them, but the serpent hits her with its tail, and Katsuo saves her by taking the hit and tells her not to worry because he's built to withstand that damage easily. Elim thanks him, and with a 3-person attack, they finish off the serpent, which gave them a lot of experience. Katsuo levels up 4 times and learns a new skill, wondering if he can combine it in the skill garden. Rakuro asks if she's talking about another game again, but she says no, because in Shangri-La you can manage skills with a fusion base obtained naturally, but Sunraku doesn't understand and says they explained it in the tutorial of the first city, but since he didn't go through there, she explains you can combine 2 skills that level up in the skill garden to create a new combined one. Rakuro thinks he's always been interested in skill types that change to another level, and those with a level number after the name, and it turns out those last ones are the ones that can be combined. Katsuo explains the garden shows how much is left for skills to level up, or if any requirements must be met. They also sell spell books, and seeing Rakuro's tragic reaction, she asks if he doesn't know about secondary occupations or guilds either. This makes him more desperate since he missed all that info by skipping a city, so he goes fishing to stop worrying about what he lost. Then Towa arrives, amazed to see them at levels 40 and 42, and asks why they worked so hard. Katsuo is about to tell her about Rakuro, but he stops her and changes the subject, mentioning that Elim has great attack power and is now level 56. He also says that shop is convenient because it creates a save point, and Towa says that's why it's a very expensive item, though it can only be used a limited number of times, and she wouldn't use it if they had more time. Then she tells them it's time to leave because to fight Wezerman they must first talk to a special NPC named Setsuna of the Lost Days, and it seems Towa has a lot of affection for her. Then we see a spirit woman singing in a tree. In a scene change, we see the group in the prismatic forest. There, Towa explains to them that on full moon nights, there is a part of those walls where the mold does not glow, and by touching it, a secret path is revealed. Rakuro had no idea there was a hidden area in that place he had already passed through, so he is surprised to see that Towa discovered it. On her side, she says it was just luck, since that hidden area is only available for a short time and she found it by chance. After this, Rakuro and Katsuo begin to joke among themselves, but Towa tells them to behave, since they have arrived and are in a flower field. She really likes that place, and Katsuo does not deny it is beautiful, but a bit sad, since those red flowers are from hell and are a type of flower related to death. At that moment, they meet Setsuna, and seeing that she looks like a ghost, the first thing Rakuro thinks is that it is a bug, but Katsuo does not think the same. He believes she was programmed like that. Towa, on her side, greets Setsuna, and she tells her that a lot of time has passed. There, Rakuro notices that her clothing is more modern than what is used in the game and thinks she might belong to the ancient civilization of the era of the gods and hopes to get a clue about that special scenario. Referring to the Vorpal epic mission, after this, Towa introduces her companions to Setsuna as a couple of idiots, and the pet. Thanks to that, Rakuro gets annoyed, since he had already thought about introducing himself in a nice way. However, Towa ignores him and tells Setsuna that with them working by her side, they will achieve eternal rest for Wazerman. Then Elim introduces herself as Vaisacha's daughter. Katsuo also does so, and Rakuro gets annoyed because they beat him to it. Thanks to that, Setsuna tells him she gathered quite a peculiar group, to which Towa answers that now they are weak, but will be ready for the day of the battle. But she was not referring to that, and when she looks at Tsunraku, she says it is the first time she sees someone with such prominent little charcoal marks, and regarding Elim, she says she looks just like Cinderella's daughter, which made her remember a very dear person, so she thanks her for reviving very beautiful memories for her. After this, Towa asks her to tell them about him, then a mission for a special scenario appears called, I send you flowers with love from the world of the living. Both accept the mission, and Setsuna begins to tell that Wazerman is her beloved husband. By fate, she died, and since then he has been protecting her grave for many years. Thanks to that, they understand why he is called the Guardian of the Tomb. Also, she does not know how much time has passed since she died, and when she realized it, she was already there. But she does not regret having died, since death is the end and final point of a past, but it should not be something that blocks the path to the future, and that is why she cannot bear that he continues tied to her tomb and her past. Wazerman used a program, a magic she created to put a barrier in that place. At that moment, Rakuro notices something strange, since it is a somewhat out-of-place word in the game, and she continues saying that he used the magical power of the moon to reverse the coordinates of the dimension to the other side so they could avoid interfering with her. That is why, on a new moon night, when the moon loses its glow, a rift opens that leads to where he is, so she begs them to let him rest in peace. Therefore, Towa tells her to trust them, and that they will take care of defeating him so she can be more at ease. Thanks to that, the boys are surprised, since they notice that Towa was acting differently than she was in the past and in the other games. So they mock her, saying that now she hangs out with an NPC, and ask if she recovered her heart, so she gets angry and sends them flying. Then she tells Setsuna that if it were not because she has a pending mission, she would have eliminated them a long time ago. At the same time, she blushes and says that sometimes she feels like showing off in front of an NPC. Since knowing her name and situation, she cannot abandon her, and now they know that she can even enter the game to the point of becoming sentimental. So Rakuro tells her that there is nothing wrong with that, since putting your heart into the game is something that can support, and Katsuo tells him that playing with all your passion is what makes it more fun, since being a professional player that is part of his job. Thanks to that, Rakuro mocks him, because despite being professional, he has not found a special scenario alone, and they start arguing, seeing that Towa laughs and comments that she remembered they are just as crazy as she is. But she gets serious and tells them that Wazerman will make all the bosses they have defeated look insignificant, since he is a special monster with a difference of 150 levels, but that does not matter because they will fight seriously and beat him. Then we see Rakuro in real life, waking up and thinking he slept very late hunting snakes to level up. He reached level 51 and Katsuo stayed at level 46, but he still has to organize the skills. And Elim told him that in Rabatuza there is also a skill garden, and at the same time he remembered that Towa told him his level did not matter to face Wazerman, since in that fight everything will depend on their skills as players. Then he goes down to breakfast, and his mother Aika tells him she is happy for him, since he is making the most of his vacation and also fulfilling his promise, which apparently was to disconnect from games to eat and do his chores at home, since the last time she disconnected him on purpose. Also, we learn she is a fan of insects, and his little sister Rumi complains to her because there is an insect in the kitchen. At the same time, we learn she is a fashion and Towa fan in real life, since she is one of the best models in the country. Even when a fan takes secret photos of her, she looks divine in all. It seems like she knows they will take pictures. Then Rakuro murmurs that Towa means eternity, and that she lives every moment to the fullest, and Setsuna means instant. She has also lived an eternity, and even though it is only a coincidence and game content, he feels that Towa is reflected in Setsuna. After that, his sister tells him she has a modeling job in the afternoon, and asks where his dad is. And just then, he returns from fishing. His name is Senji. Then we learn that in Rakuro's family there is a rule called the Promise, which is to have breakfast and dinner together every Sunday, so they can talk and spend quality time. Since if they don't do it, each one would get into their hobbies and lose the chance to spend time as a family. After this, we see Rakuro return to his room to enter the game, since there are only 2 weeks left to fight Wezerman, and he will be a tough opponent. According to the information Towa gave him, he has a wide range of high-speed and long-range attacks that kill instantly. Because of that, he will play a trash game where bugs gave crazy speed to attacks, called Berserk Online Passion. Upon entering, he notices the game is empty as usual, but on the way to defeat the final boss, he meets another player, who turns out to be a relatively new one called Dragonfly, so Sunraku is surprised to see that game still attracts new players. After this, they agree on a duel and notice he is a novice, but even so, he can use basic bugs. So Rakuro gets excited and tells him he will feel firsthand the bugs players have developed over time after a hard research. In this way, we see that the battle between the two continues, and they draw the attention of other veteran players of the game, who know Rakuro, and apparently they have had several fights, but Dragonfly has not been able to win even one round. So he attacks him again head-on, and Rakuro defeats him easily. Still, he gets up excited and asks for one last rematch, so Rakuro accepts, and the first round begins. At that moment, Dragonfly rushes forward, and when he is within reach, Sunraku throws a punch, which the novice dodges using the bug he used before on him. Seeing what he did, he congratulates him, and remembers that he went to that game to prepare for the Wezerman battle and thinks he needs a higher level opponent. But then Dragonfly takes advantage of the opportunity and quickly approaches him, surprising him with an attack called Flying Fists, but it turns out that using that technique without bugs leaves the player unprotected, which Rakuro explains while launching a rain of attacks that Dragonfly cannot escape, so he decides to get closer. At that point, Rakuro says he will use his special move, but the other makes an unexpected move and throws the Flying Fists again, but this time separated. Rakuro had never seen that move and thinks he could counter them with his special move, but decides better to take the hit to see what happens, so he is knocked flying and loses the match. Because of this, Dragonfly celebrates his victory, and Rakuro gets up asking the opinion of the other players about that attack, and they say both fists made contact and caused damage. They get serious discussing the similarity of that move to others that exist, and conclude that it is not the same as others. So they congratulate the novice for discovering a new bug technique, and also tell him he has the right to name it, but nothing comes to mind, and Rakuro tells him it doesn't have to be right now, and he can think about it calmly. Also, since the fight is not over, he will return the favor by teaching him a better bug technique, which is harder because it can only be activated at the start of the round. Once the round begins, we see Rakuro duplicate himself saying the technique is called Doppelganger, and that he discovered it, then attacks and thinks that's why he still likes that game, and that way he ends up beating Dragonfly, who complains because it's a very dirty bug, but he gets up and thanks him for everything he taught him, also saying he will think of a cool name for his technique. In a scene change, we see Rakuro running through the palace of the Rabbit Country, and he's very excited because he wants to try combining skills, so he heads to the skill garden. On the way, Elim tells him that specifically, the one in the palace offers better products than the one in the city of Rabbituza. Once they arrive, they are greeted by a little rabbit named Elki, who speaks very patiently. Then Elim says she is one of his triplet sisters. Setting that aside, Elka asks what they want, and he asks about skill combination, so she answers that she is very good at that. So he asks her to help combine skills, and while he watches, she says that if he combines 2 high-level skills, he gets a much better skill. In that way, Rakuro manages to select the ones he will combine, reaching 6 combinations. Then she tells him the total is 6,000 coins for the 6 combinations, and Rakuro pays her. After that, she asks him to wait a minute, and while he does, she reviews his stats and comments that he didn't have a chance to raise his vitality because he focused on reaching the requirements to equip the new Lunar Steel swords, so he still has very weak defense. Then Elki returns with a large bottle, saying it's quite voluminous because it's 6 skills, and tells him he has to drink it all at once. Rakuro does so and sees he quickly learned them all, so he hopes they will be useful. Meanwhile, the rabbits congratulate him and take the opportunity to offer him a secret skill book, which he can only get in Rabbituza, and since he is Elim's friend, they can give it to him cheaper. But then, Elim warns him to be careful, because, although she doesn't seem like it, she can scam him. Because of that, Elka covers Elim's mouth and tells her not to worry, because as these are products from a special area, she is prepared to pay extra. So she lets Elim go and asks what his budget is, to which Rakuro answers around 80,000 coins, and she says he can buy without problems, showing the available skills and their prices, and we see the cheapest costs 50,000 coins. Seeing this, Rakuro is impressed by how high the prices are, but right then Elka asks if he will pass up that tremendous opportunity. Because of that, Sunraku cannot resist and buys one of the most expensive, and once he leaves the store, he regrets it because he couldn't resist and is left with only 150 coins. At the same time, he laments and tells Elim he wanted a defense set and now will have to save money before the battle against Wazermon. Then he asks what time it is, and Elim shows him, saying he's almost late again, so he asks her to summon the gate and returns to the tavern where he meets with Towa and Katsuo. There we see that she is in a good mood, so they ask what made her smile, and she answers nothing specific, just that she just made a big decision. She tells them that in 2 weeks they will challenge Wezermon, but they have a problem. The only ones who know how to find Wezermon are the members of Ashura Kai, and they use him to level up and practice their assassin techniques. Therefore, if they don't do something when the new Moon Knight arrives, they might run into them. Because of this, Katsuo asks if they can ask them to cooperate with her since she belongs to the same clan, but she answers no because they oppose defeating him. At the same time, she tells them that the clan mostly dedicates itself to killing other players, so almost everyone hates them. And recently the system was updated so that players who dedicate themselves to PK receive another punishment. It turns out that if a PK is defeated by another player, besides the reward, the player gets ownership of all their items and equipment, including those stored in any vaults. In other words, they end up with nothing, and the high-ranking members of that clan have tons of rare items. In other words, now PKs are considered walking treasure chests, and consequently, PK hunters have appeared. But they have discovered various ways to bypass the system, yet if they attack the hideout, none of those plans would make sense. Because of that, the guys understand where she's going, and she tells them yes, because she knows the secret location of the clan, and says she no longer needs cowards who only get in her way. Therefore, she came up with crushing them once and for all. In a scene change, we see a flower field where Setsuna strolls with a Wezermon, but nothing else is shown. On the other hand, we see Towa in a good mood, leaving a store, and a couple of players enter the same store and realize that there are no revival items left, saying something big must be happening for guilds to start gathering those items. Also, they talk about a possible alliance, and Towa, while spying on them, smiles. It turns out that after the big update, many are excited, but some things happen secretly in the shadows. Regarding Reiji and Mia, we see them talking about the update changes, saying they added new scenarios, occupations, and modified the luck condition to grit your teeth. Meanwhile, Mia wonders if there will be new weapons, and when Reiji finally summons the courage and invites her to go on an adventure with him to check out the new update, she stands up surprised and draws her bow because she thought she heard a monster, but what she heard was Rei, who is nervous because she wants to send a message to Sunraku. She tries to calm down, saying she has been writing that message for more than a week, so there's no problem since it's neither casual nor formal. Also, she didn't forget any point or comma, and quickly sends a messenger bird. She worries that Rakuro has disconnected, but it is a letter from her sister, Saiger 100, who asks her to stop whatever she is doing because she needs her to attack the Ashura Kai clan. Meanwhile, Rakuro talks with Elim, and she tells him the day of the battle has arrived, so she has something she'd like to give him. But at that moment, Rei's messenger bird arrives, and Rakuro confuses it with the eagle he fought in the Colosseum, so he gets a little upset. Finally, they realize it's a message, and he reads the letter, which starts with a formal greeting and then apologizes for writing, saying it seemed incorrect to ask in person. As it turns out, she wants to invite him to check the update changes. Rakuro comments the tone is very formal, and thought it was a letter challenging him to a duel. However, he can't accept the invitation because he has the battle against Wezermon, so he thinks about writing to decline, but then another bird arrives and Elim thinks he has gotten attached to him, so she gets jealous, but finally reads the other letter and realizes it's also a message from Saiger Zero, who apologizes because although she was the one who invited him, an important matter came up and they won't be able to meet, so she apologizes again for all offenses. Rakuro replies, "There is no problem." Then he says it's time to go shopping as part of the final preparations, and Vash arrives unexpectedly and tells him that night is a new moon. Because of that, they both get scared since they don't know when it arrived, and Vash says it was just a moment ago, then looks at Rakuro's determined face and leaves, but not without telling him to give funeral rites to that living dead and not to forget his Vorpal spirit. After this, Elim tells him she will stay there that night and lends him a necklace to wear in the battle against Weserman. The necklace was given to her by Vash and is her lucky charm, but Rakuro says they won't need it to win, though he knows if he wears it something spectacular will happen, and thanks her. She puts it on and asks him to come back soon. We see it's an identification fragment necklace, which has no effect, and we learn it is a remnant, a piece, a fragment, part of something whose user, place, or time of use is impossible to know. However, it's undeniable that it was once used to prove someone's existence. In a scene change, we see Rakuro's sister walking near his room and reading a sign asking not to be spoken to until tomorrow because she has an important confrontation, and we see she already took her energy drinks. At nightfall, we return to the game and see Towa watching the Ashura Kai base while they wait for her, but just then, Saiger Zero falls from above and eliminates one of them with a single blow. At that moment, everyone realizes they are surrounded not by one guild, but by an alliance of several guilds, and this is revenge for all the players they have murdered. Seeing they are trapped, the leader tells the others to escape and meet at the secret garden. Meanwhile, we see Rakuro showing off his new hip gear, which increased his vitality from 7 to 22. Because of that, Katsuo congratulates him for going from paper defense to wet cardboard defense. At the same time, he says he drank the recommended energy drink, and now the others taste like water. He also tells him he discovered a new bug in the other game, and then Towa arrives and says everything went perfectly and that she saw Saiger Zero very angry, wondering if she has a personal grudge against Ashura Kai. And thanks to that, Rakuro thinks about the second letter she sent him. Katsuo asks if they will come to avenge her when they discover her, and she answers that it's just a matter of giving them another beating. After this, they form a group and review the plan, also sharing some items. Meanwhile, some clan members have escaped and wonder how their hideout was discovered and suspect someone betrayed them. The leader has a suspicion but doesn't want to believe it. However, upon reaching the secret garden entrance, they cannot enter because another group is inside, and Orselot shouts they were betrayed by the second in command, that is, Towa. She smiles and tells the guys she thought she heard the barking of a failed dog. After this, they focus on their mission, but since the moon is not visible, they cannot see Setsuna, so they approach the entrance and Towa thinks they will make her wish come true, then touches a black spot that grows and creates a kind of portal. Passing through, the guys enter another dimension, where there is only a cherry tree, and they hear a song. They also see a robotic samurai sitting beside a grave. Then the system notifies them they have encountered a special monster called Weserman, the guardian of the grave, and their levels change to 50. After that, the samurai stands and adopts a combat stance, so Rakuro advances and says he challenges him. But before finishing speaking, Weserman attacks with a wind slash, but Rakuro dodges and attacks with his close combat skill. However, his kick does nothing, and he barely dodges Weserman's next attack. Then he draws his twin Imperial B-swords and manages to block another wind slash, and they continue fighting while Towa laughs, seeing he was able to track him with his eyes the first time. She remembers how she warned him about the wind slash, which ignores armor and causes an instant kill. Seeing it's not his only lethal attack and also considering the 150 level difference, Rakuro concludes it's not a monster they can defeat and there must be an alternative victory condition, meaning it's not necessary to reduce the enemy's HP to 0, and according to his experience, there are several alternatives. But after trying several times, Towa concludes the fight is about surviving for a set time, as Weserman's battlefield changes over time, and in the first phase they must survive for 10 minutes. Continuing the battle, we see Rakuro barely dodging attacks, and Towa says the key to success will be him, since a pro gamer can't be beaten in a quick draw duel, so he is the only one who can overcome his attacks, and we see Katsuo analyzing every attack pattern of the samurai. Thanks to that, Towa thinks that fighting alongside them, she won't lose, so she takes out a reward scale and bets everything on that battle. At that moment, Rakuro lands some hits but can't hurt him, while Weserman's blows can injure or kill him instantly. That's when he realizes it's just as Towa said, an enemy who can't be defeated easily, and just then, the samurai launches another wind slash and manages to hit him, making his HP drop to 0 quickly. Seeing that, Katsuo hurries and throws Rakuro a rebirth jewel, and he manages to revive. In a scene change, we go back a little and see that before the boys enter to fight Wezerman, Toa gave them some items. One of them was the Tear Jewel of Rebirth, which is an item to revive and must be used within 10 seconds after a player dies. Thanks to that, Rakuro revives with all his HP, so both think that item is very powerful, and Toa comments that they are very rare. She traveled to several cities and bought the only 12 she found. So she asks them not to waste them since each costs 4 million coins, and both are surprised to hear the price. She distributes the 12, so each gets 4. She also has another item called Divine Life-Saving Herb, which must also be used within the first 10 seconds, but this one revives with half HP, and she gives 5 to each. With this, they have a total of 27 items with which they will face Wezerman. The plan is that Sunraku will take the attacks, and if he falls, either of the other two will revive him and take his place, while he revives, and the same strategy will be applied. If any of the three die, well, that's the only idea they have to survive for a limited time. This way they set the plan in motion, and Toa calls it the zombie tactic. Returning to the present, after Rakuro has been revived, the samurai attacks Katsuo and he barely manages to dodge. He shouts that he will take care of him until Sunraku is ready and asks him for advice while doing so. Rakuro, for his part, tells him nothing helps and he must just dodge with all his strength. Although the advice doesn't sound very convincing, Toa motivates them and tells them they have survived 2 minutes and 5 seconds, which is the longest record, and she expected nothing less from them. Then she asks Rakuro what he thinks after facing him, and he replies that as long as there is no big plan, it is sure there's no way to defeat him, and he earns his place among the Seven Supreme, just like Lycaon. At that, Toa tells him she spent a fortune on this plan and tells him to do his best. After that, Rakuro inspects his weapons and realizes that in just 2 minutes he used half the durability of his swords, so he switches to his Lake Short Swords version 3, because in that version they have more durability, and comments that it is a battle of endurance. Then, he attacks the samurai from behind, but doesn't even scratch him. At the same time, he asks Katsuo for a change, and he says he will be ready to take his place as soon as he dies. At that, Wezerman prepares a new attack called Lightning Burst, and we see lightning falling, but Rakuro shouts not to underestimate him and uses Skater's Feet. The other two also dodge, and Toa warns them that this attack will last 5 seconds. Sunraku keeps running and tells them he has no problem because he already learned the pattern and can dodge it. But what he didn't expect was that the samurai would use another skill that forms a giant smoky hand, and when Rakuro sees it, he freezes because he doesn't know it. So he receives the attack and his HP drops to 0. Katsuo wastes no time, revives him, and tries to distract the samurai, but he cannot dodge his next attack and ends up dying, so Toa revives him. At that, Rakuro wastes no time and draws Wezerman's attention, but he doesn't last long and is killed, so again Toa throws him another revival item and then does something with the balance scale. Katsuo, on his side, tells her he cannot evade and that it was a miracle he managed to dodge for 30 seconds. Meanwhile, Toa continues manipulating the scale and says that surviving that long is surprising, and thanks to his effort, they still have half the revival items left. Then Katsuo asks what that scale is, and she answers that it needs some preparation to be used, but it's already time to use it. At that moment, the samurai stops and emits smoke, so Toa tells them that 10 minutes have passed and the second phase will begin. This way we see the samurai form a magic circle in the sky and something begins to emerge. Katsuo will be in charge of facing it, and we see that from the magic circle he summons a horse-shaped robot called Kirin. Although Toa had already told them, Katsuo is amazed because it's bigger than he imagined. Therefore, he starts running and the horse follows him. At the same time, Toa tells them they cannot let the horse fuse with Wezerman, because if they do, it will be the end for all of them. Also, that phase lasts 10 minutes, and she warns Katsuo that the horse will start launching missiles, but even so, he must distract it and keep it away from the samurai. To do that, he must mount it, but Kirin will do everything possible to throw him off, and Toa tells him it will probably be easy since he played a similar game before. But Katsuo says that was a fighting game, not horse taming. At that moment, he analyzes the situation, and seeing that it is a machine, they must maintain it, and he notices some stairs beside it. He climbs up there and uses the snake whip skill to wrap it around its neck. Even so, the horse moves with great force. Meanwhile, Toa starts using the scale, which belongs to an NPC organization. It is an item of the highest rarity, and when placing an item on the offering plate on the left, The scale calculates, and the blessing plate on the right provides different favors. There, Toa comments that she not only thought about spending all her money on resurrection items, but will use everything she has earned so far, totaling more than 30 million coins, and offers everything to the scale. Katsuo, on his side, cannot resist much longer, and Rakuro is running out of stamina, and without that, he won't be able to dodge. But it turns out that Toa offered everything to get the temporary favor of adding parameter points, and with the 30 million, she managed to get 300 points total, which she distributes among the three, and Rakuro notices his stamina increase. Checking his status, he realizes his luck also increased, and he knows it was thanks to Toa. Also, knowing that the samurai takes no damage, he puts away his swords and approaches to fight with his fists up close. At that, the samurai is about to use his cutting skill, but Rakuro uses his fortune hand, hits the hilt, and sends the sword flying. Then he uses Skater's feet and grabs his sword, which is quite heavy, and thinks almost all his attacks depend on that weapon, but still traps him with his hand and kills him in front of Toa. At that, he uses his smoke hand attack, but thanks to Toa, we discover that the way to save yourself from that technique is by positioning behind him. So he does, and manages to revive Sunraku just in time. After this, Toa warns them that they are at a critical point and must not die anymore, so they must be careful with unknown attacks. On his side, Sunraku agrees, which is why he lets him keep the sword, since he already knows his moves. On the other hand, we see that Katsuo couldn't hold on the horse any longer, and came up with the idea to tie himself to its face using the whip. At that moment, the 10 minutes pass and both the mount and Weserman stop, then the samurai falls to his knees and his armor begins to crack. There, Toa tells them that only once did she reach that point with her old clan, and that time they were annihilated with the first attack, because when his armor starts to crack, he lets out a roar that emits a shockwave, causing everyone's death. But this time, Toa has an ace up her sleeve, but she doesn't know if it will work and pulls out a bottle, saying that in that game, the lore and setting give the key to winning. And she used to think Weserman was a cyborg with divine technology. However, Vash called him dead while alive, and with that, she realized he is an undead-type monster. So his weakness is holy water, and she throws the bottle containing it, which received the blessings of Saint Iristella, the patron of love, and we see the samurai start screaming. Thanks to this, the samurai couldn't perform his attack, and Toa celebrates that she managed to stop him. Then flames come out of his body, and Rakuro jokes that he got angry because she threw holy water from the saint. But Toa tells him that Saint is worshipped by everyone in the game. Meanwhile, Katsuo remains tied to the horse, and is curious about what's happening, since he can't see well. At that moment, the horse starts transforming into a mecha robot, and Katsuo falls off. Toa is surprised, since she had never reached that point. And Rakuro comments that it would be a big problem if they combined. Then the robot begins to attack and Katsuo can only run and dodge. Rakuro thinks there must be a way to deal with the mecha and asks Toa to support Katsuo because Weserman's body started to crumble, and he thinks in this third phase they must also endure another 10 minutes until it's completely destroyed, and it might be the last phase. So he asks her to leave it to him, promising to endure the 10 minutes no matter what. She agrees, but warns him not to do anything stupid, since if he dies one more time, it could be the end for everyone, and then she leaves everything in his hands. After that, Rakuro launches himself at the samurai and defends against his attacks while apologizing to Toa because since he heard the plan was to endure, he has been thinking that it's a boring way to win and that he has to hold out 30 minutes, so he thinks it's something bad and compares it to a trash game. At that moment, he attacks and manages to break a small part of the helmet, and comments that it's how he imagined when he saw the samurai's reaction to holy water, because now it's possible to hurt him. However, the samurai prepares to counterattack, and Sunraku changes his headgear to one called Combat Helm with spikes. Thanks to that, he manages to block the sword with his new helmet, and while changing to his new Moonsteel swords, he boasts that he has practiced a lot to block with his new helmet, which is made with beetle materials, so he tells the samurai he will defeat him long before time runs out and blocks another attack with his helmet, which leaves his hands free to attack again and lands a critical hit. But then Weserman counterattacks and Rakuro gets annoyed because he made a critical hit, but Weserman doesn't even flinch and wonders if he is really causing damage. He's aware he's not on his level, but he spent a lot for this fight. Then he uses an art of Vorpal daggers, and while Weserman attacks him, Rakuro's attack appears behind because he used a skill called Lunar Mirror, then dodges the next attack and takes advantage that the samurai's back is exposed to use an assassin's thrust and other skills that allow him to land several critical hits. Due to this, the samurai falls to his knees and starts laughing like crazy because he is taking revenge for all the times Rakuro killed him. Meanwhile, on Toa's side, she tells Katsuo they need to worry about how to stop the mecha. Katsuo barely dodges an explosion and says he already hit it several times, and it seems the damage does affect it normally, but Towa reminds him it's not necessary to risk so much since just holding out is enough, but he ignores her and attacks with his whip. Thanks to that, he ends up dead and Towa revives him. Now the mecha is chasing her. Then Katsuo notices Towa left him an item that boosts the player's parameters for 15 minutes and gives statuses equivalent to level 99, but it has horrible penalties, because when she used them she had a really hard time. But if he wants a perfect score, he must be willing to take risks. That's why Katsuo interrupts her and notices he can't see colors well and also has trouble hearing, so he asks if those are the effects she mentioned. It's strange, but he expected worse. Towa says that's not the worst part, and that every 30 seconds he will lose a level. Katsuo yells that she should have told him earlier, but she says he didn't let her finish, and that she will raise her parameters with what she has left from the balance, and also takes one of the pills, saying she knows it's a game and not real, but since she found out what they're made of, she has a hard time swallowing them. Angry at what she did, Katsuo uses a skill to attack the robot and manages to make it stagger. Meanwhile, Towa uses a skill, but the robot attacks her with a ray she barely dodges, and we see she lost an arm, so she comments that beating it will be difficult even boosting parameters. Then Katsuo notices the abdomen part is thicker, so that's where the important components must be. On Rakuro's side, he continues fighting the samurai and comments that the Moonsteel swords go well with his skill set. Then his HP drops to 9, so he can activate his climax boost, which activates when he has only a third of his life, and his parameters increase proportional to the enemies who have a higher level than him. He also has another key skill called Hungry Wolf, whose effect is that for 1 minute, in exchange for lowering his resistance, he increases his strength, agility, and vitality, and the increment index he uses is the little HP he has left. And while dodging skills, he explains that in the game, there is a parameter called Hunger Level, and at that moment, he has the necessary Hunger Level, so if he manages to use his skills well, he'll have a chance to defeat him. But then the samurai looks at his necklace and doesn't move, then mentions someone named Alice. And because of that, Rakuro remembers what Vash told him, that he was a pretty clumsy guy, and remembers when Elim lent him the necklace. Then the samurai continues saying things Rakuro doesn't understand, then calls him the chosen child of the second plan, and finally says that if he breaks his promise, he will be completely defeated by his sovereign blue sky. Because of this, Rakuro wonders if now he will really attack seriously, and starts with a wind slash, which the samurai dodges, thinking he will keep doing the same, but then realizes he was wrong because the samurai starts combining all his attacks and doesn't give him a break. After that, he makes a new move called Pyroclastic Dragon, which Rakuro barely dodges, but then the dragon forms a black cloud and Wezerman uses Ash Blizzard, so 3 flame dragons along with the blizzard attack him, and he has no choice but to escape and start searching his inventory, but the samurai is waiting for him. Then he says that the sovereign blue sky is his sacrifice offering, immobilizes him, and Rakuro realizes this technique is different from the others, and all he can do is block it. The samurai uses his skill, and Rakuro tries to block it with his helmet, but it breaks and pierces through him. The hit was so strong the others felt it, and it even destroyed his hip gear, but Rakuro doesn't even know what happened. And then Katsuo tries to revive him, but Towa stops him because she realizes he hasn't given up, since he threw a resurrection tear jewel before being cut, and comments that he won't be able to defeat him with just that attack. On the other hand, we see that Towa comes up with a plan to destroy the mecha's abdomen, but at that moment we see Rakuro throw a resurrection tear jewel, and he calls that move auto-regeneration. Although his gear wasn't as lucky since his belt was destroyed and his helmet became very cracked. Therefore, he concluded that his blue sky technique is completely lethal, since it can destroy gear, pierce armor, and killed him with one blow. Then the samurai tells him that as long as he can't surpass his greatest power, he will never be able to defeat him. After that, he begins attacking him with the same blue sovereign sky combo, and Sunraku analyzes while dodging that last time the combo lasted about 30 seconds before finishing with blue sky, and he realizes that the dragon technique has a small lag before appearing, so it's not a threat. The Ash Blizzard is the same, so it's easy to dodge, but this time the techniques are launched at random. However, he can dodge them, but thinks it's better to keep distance and reduce his movements to a minimum to get used to it. But right then, he is caught again, and without hesitation throws another resurrection tear jewel and is killed again. After that, he revives again and assumes that even with the best level 99 gear, the blue sky would definitely destroy him completely, and Wezerman repeats the phrase he said earlier, and we see he is caught again. There he thinks that this prevents him from dodging and forces him to take the attack head-on. After reviving again, he realizes he spent the last resurrection jewel, so he only has 5 divine herbs left. And the samurai's attack comes every 30 seconds, so he only has 3 minutes. And that way he won't last the estimated time of the 3rd phase. Then Wezerman repeats the phrase. Rakuro attacks him and begins analyzing what he needs to be able to defeat him. Meanwhile, we see that Towa has already explained the plan to Katsuo and both let Rakuro handle Wezerman while they deal with the robot. Then Katsuo tells her that the plan to destroy the armor and meet the right conditions is going to be difficult, but he knows that being a pro gamer, they can achieve it. And upon hearing that, Towa stabs herself, and her HP reaches 0. This surprises Katsuo, and after reviving her, he asks what she's doing, and she says that being a professional with the spear, she can't fight without an arm, so she did that to regenerate. But Katsuo complains that she didn't give him any signal. After that, Towa launches an attack on the robot's weak point, and when the robot is about to counterattack, Katsuo grabs it with his whip, and since his stats are higher, the robot can no longer lift him, and he can use 2 whips, which makes it lose balance. After that, Towa launches a rain of attacks while he continues controlling it so it can't get up. Then Towa notices her weapon loses durability due to the robot's hardness, so she changes spears and thinks that especially the abdomen area is the hardest of all. Therefore, she asks Katsuo to turn it around and attacks it with a skill called Sunlight Spear, and manages to break the metal shell, but loses her weapon. Then the robot starts firing rays and they have to run from it, but then they imagine Rakuro mocking them for not being able to handle a simple robot and decide it's time to hunt him. So they approach dodging, and Towa pulls out a new spear, but realizes she only has 2 left, and since they're expensive, she envies Rakuro since his fists don't wear out. Meanwhile, Katsuo attracts the missiles, she dodges the lasers, and uses a skill called Shadow Wedge, which is magic that immobilizes enemies, and the effect continues until the weapon is destroyed, and calculating the robot's size, it will only last 5 seconds. Seeing that opportunity, she pulls out her last spear, the giant killer spike, a perfect weapon for the occasion, but at that moment, Katsuo notices a missile heading toward her and warns her, but she can't dodge, and Katsuo is about to throw a resurrection tear jewel, but she shouts that it's okay because even though she lost an arm again, to defeat that robot she only needs 1, and using the skill Decisive Shot, throws her giant killer spike, and then Katsuo uses his best skill to hit the spike, and it pierces the robot, thus managing to defeat it. After that, Towa wonders how Sunraku is doing, and we see he just used his last item to revive and says he has everything ready. The Lunar Steel assembly bar is at maximum, and he equips the bird head again. He also says that in the next 30 seconds he can surpass him, dodges all his techniques and calculates the moment to do Blue Sky, since the key to defeating him lies in his swords, which he combines to form the twin lunar bow. So, the lower his stats are compared to the enemy, the special effect will increase critical hit damage. At that moment, Rakuro is immobilized and thinks that this is the most suitable weapon to repel, because with a critical with a high block rate, combining climax boost and then hungry at the same time, agility will increase, and that will be the state to receive the most powerful technique. But a message appears saying that the climax boost ability cannot activate because he has more than 10 HP points, and he realizes he messed everything up. The samurai on his side is already ready to attack, and Sunraku knows that without those 2 skills, he won't be able to match his speed and tries to think of a way. At that moment, a dagger hits the samurai, and when he turns, he sees Towa and Katsuo, but between the two is Setsuna smiling at him. Thanks to that, Wezerman gets distracted, and Rakuro takes the moment to stab himself, since it turns out there is a skill modified by the update, which says that when a player has more than 50 luck points and self-inflicts damage, once per day, they will remain standing with 1 HP. Thanks to that, he can activate Hungry Wolf and Climax Boost, so he uses his Crescent Vorpal Moon skill, and Wezerman uses Blue Sky, so both skills collide, and Wezerman's sword flies away. Then Rakuro tells him his power was great, but he already analyzed it and won't be able to do the same to him. After blocking his strongest attack, the sword breaks and Wezerman begins to fall apart, and while doing so, comments that it is incredible since he has conquered his greatest technique, so he congratulates them, and looking at the 3 says, "May the sky bless you," and then we see Setsuna walking with Wezerman in a field of flowers. After saying that phrase, Rakuro asks Wezerman if it's a play on words, but he turns around and walks away smiling, since Setsuna had also told him that several times. At that moment, Rakuro gets on guard seeing him grab the sword, but he congratulates him, calling him descendant of the colonizers. Sunraku had tried to talk to him before, and it was useless, but now he reacts to his comments, and seeing him approach Katsuo gets on guard, but Towa tells him he's about to die. So Wezerman ignores them, approaches Setsuna's grave while crumbling and tells Setsuna he will go with her, After that, the cherry tree begins to lose its flowers and they return to the flower field where we see Setsuna's ghost watching the sword crumble. Then she thanks the three of them for fulfilling her wish, but corrects herself saying it was the wish that the Setsuna from long ago had dreamed of. Because of that, Rakuro comments that the way she says it is as if she wasn't Setsuna. Towa asks about those words, and Setsuna smiles saying that she is her, but not the real Setsuna who died that day. It turns out she is a vestige of hers, created by wishes, which asked that her beloved no longer be bound by the death of his beloved, and recreated her in his image and likeness like a photograph. Because of this, Rakuro understands that they took her form because of the wishes of the real Setsuna. In other words, they copied her, and now he understands why they called her Setsuna of the Lost Days. After this, the girl says that once her role is finished, she will disappear, and Towa asks her to wait, but she tells him not to be sad, since she already knew that would happen from the moment the world answered her wish. She also tells them that they are pioneers, and the descendants of the second plan will colonize the world, and if they want to know their own roots and the truth of the world, they should seek Bahamut. But Towa tells them that there is supposedly no monster called Bahamut in Shangri-La, and asks Setsuna what she means. But she answers that they should look for him and find him themselves, because it's part of their process of making their way to the future. And before disappearing, she thanks Towa for having visited her so many times, and says she loves him very much. Towa wants to say something to her, but she says goodbye with a smile and thanks him. After this, the system notifies them that they completed the mission. Seeing that, Towa thanks them for accompanying her, but they say they just felt like participating, and Rakuro comments that since the start of the game, it's the first time a special monster has fallen, and he's curious about what rewards they will get. So Towa tells them to check the rewards. But at that moment, a bell rings with an announcement to all players, saying the defeat of the special monster Wazermon, the guardian of the tomb, is confirmed. They say their names, and that they are 3 excellent players. Also that after Wazermon's defeat, the story of the world of Shangri-La has advanced. At that moment, we see that at the game company, the computer we saw earlier increased its story progress to 12%. After this, we see some players from a clan specialized in analyzing the game world who are in the Royal Library. After hearing the announcement, they are agitated and asked to call the professor in the real world because something big just happened. They say they already told his wife and discussed the story of the world that was just announced, so they wonder if it's different from the normal story. Since the story so far is about helping the NPCs to colonize the world, and it's possible the Earth has already undergone changes, but the first thing they must do is investigate Wazermon, since he was a special boss they had no knowledge of, and they mention the ones they know so far, which are Siegwurm, Lycaon, Cathanid, the Orchestra, Wazermon, and that there are still 2 unknowns left, and that's why they want to contact the guys since they defeated the latter. At that moment, they receive a reply from the professor's wife saying she will wake him up so he can connect. Meanwhile, the leader of the Schwarz-Wolf clan, Siger 100, gathers her clan members and comments that those 3 got ahead of them in defeating one of the special monsters, and they will lose respect as the best clan. They also recognize Towa as a member of Ashura Kai and now understand why they didn't see her in the attack since she was fighting Wazermon, so the leader deduces that she betrayed them by going after Wazermon. Regarding Sunraku, they recognize him as the player involved with Lycaon, so Rei wonders if Towa and Sunraku will be more than friends, and at that moment they receive a notification for a trip to the new continent, but the leader says some players, including herself, will stay because she's interested in the guys, especially Rakuro since he's a novice who defeated a special boss, so they must contact them at all costs, and she might even offer a reward. Then they notice Siger Zero is no longer there since she said a friend was in trouble and left. In a scene change, the guys leave the flower field and Ashura Kai members are waiting to take revenge on Towa for betraying them, so they attack assuming they are tired from the fight against Wazermon and plan to steal their reward. But a magic circle appears and we learn that one of the measures against PKs is the SOS signal, which can be sent to a friend when encountering PKs, and if the friend who receives the signal has the ability to teleport for friend rescue, they can be summoned to the location, and at that moment, Siger Zero appears. Upon seeing her, the PKs get scared, and Rakuro apologizes for the trouble, but inside she's happy he called her. She gives the PKs the chance to escape and spares their lives, but they say they are fed up with being underestimated and mocked and launch an attack, but she easily defeats them. After this, Towa finishes eliminating them and all their items go to his position, and Rakuro thanks Siger Zero, but she says it's not necessary and congratulates him for defeating Wazermon. After this, she doesn't know how to say that he no longer needs her and stares at him, causing Rei Ray to blush. Then Toa asks Siger Zero to kill her too, because she's tired of being a PK and wants to atone for her crimes. But she wants to have fun first, so she challenges Ray to a duel since she's wanted to seriously fight her for a while. Ray accepts and draws a sword called Satan, which is the Demon King's sword, and her armor also changes to black. Since her sister had told her about it and she planned to fight seriously, she activates a lot of reinforcement magic while Toa uses Orcelot's sword and the duel begins. Toa feints and tries to attack from behind, but Ray blocks it. And not only that, she makes her weapon stick to the armor, so she takes advantage to attack, but only manages to cut off the arm holding the sword. Toa recovers the arm, and when their swords clash, she says she won't dishonor Setsuna's memory by letting herself be defeated so easily. Therefore, Ray says if that's the case, she'll use her best technique, repels her attack, and uses her Chaos Abyss skill, creating an explosive wave. After this, we see that Ray won the fight. Thanks to that, the kids are shocked and start picking up the items she left. She helps them, and then they transfer them. After this, she thanks him and nervously asks Rakuro what his relationship with Toa is, and he answers that she is a friend from the video games. Thanks to that, Ray feels relieved and then begins to glow, as the SOS call time has run out before she leaves. Rakuro thanks her for saving them and tells her that one day he will return the favor, and she tells him that if that is the case, she hopes one day they can go on adventures together, but she leaves without finishing the sentence. Then they realize she left the dark sword, and Rakuro thinks it is because it is stained with innocent blood, and although it scares him a little, he keeps it for the moment. Later, we see them returning to the city to save the game. Upon arriving at the inn, he finds Elim, who hugs him crying because she was worried. He returns her the necklace and thanks her because it helped him defeat Wezerman. Meanwhile, on the other side at the Utopia Company arrives Sakai Tsukuyogi, the general manager of public relations. There, they inform him that everything is chaos because they defeated Wezerman, but he expected it, since in the order they had planned, the first to be defeated should have been Kthanid, and Wezerman was halfway or even last in order. Then the elevator arrives and we meet Ritsu Amachi, who is the executive producer of the game. We also meet Tsukuyo, the founder of Utopia and the creative administrator of the game. Once they meet, Ritsu blames her for them defeating Wezerman, and she said they would defeat him in 10 years, but they did not expect them to use the reward balance. However, they cannot complain about their victory since they did not use cheats. But Tsukuyo tells Ritsu that it is her fault since she asked to make Wezerman weaker and tells her to admit her fault. But she does not, and instead says that with the initial parameters, no one could have defeated him. But she responds that Wezerman had to be like that since he is the most powerful hero of the era of the gods, and was defeated by the stupid balance of the game, and the story she created with so much effort is falling apart. Then they continue arguing about senseless nonsense, and even Sakai ends up getting hit trying to stop them. Meanwhile, we see that the cause of all this disorder, that is, Rakuro, is sleeping very peacefully at home. And on the other hand, Ray cannot sleep from the excitement of having helped him. The next day, Rakuro removes the Do Not Disturb sign and returns to the game to check the reward. Upon entering, he finds Elim still crying, and she tells him that his father wants to see him. Vash asks him to tell how the battle against the samurai was, and he answers that he was very powerful, so much so that all the monsters he faced before were nothing compared to him. Vash also asks if he managed to leave in peace, and Rakuro says yes, and that he congratulated him, saying, "May heaven bless him." Thanks to this, Vash says it is time, and asks if he wants to know the truth of the world, to which he says yes. But to do so, he has to get a few items since everything has its order. Because of this, Rakuro is disappointed, because he expected an X stage of the Vorpal epic, but it is just a typical gathering mission. The items he has to find are the receiver, positioner, and delta transmitter. So he asks where he can find them, and he says in the arid dark ruins, but that place does not appear on his map. So he thinks of going with Peets to ask for a map, and Vash leaves without giving more clues, saying he will patiently wait for his return. Because of this, Rakuro thinks that place is very far, and Elim confirms it, but he tells her not to underestimate him since his current level is 78, having leveled up after defeating Wezerman. Thanks to that, he has new abilities, and not only that, he was also given several items. One of them, and the most important apparently, is the Blue Sky skill book, which contains a set of memories of the celestial swordsmanship skills left by Wezerman, but to be able to see it, he needs a divine device to decipher its content. And thanks to that, he is excited because he has the opportunity to learn Wezerman's techniques. The last item is an inventory key, which is an accessory available only to a handful of divines, and says that even if another player defeats him while using it, he will not lose that accessory nor the items stored in the inventory. It also grants access to an extended space and synchronizes with the user's biometric information to become part of him. Because of this, he wonders if it is like an infinite warehouse, so he equips it and teleports to another dimension. There he is surprised to see what is stored inside and wonders what all that is. On the other hand, in the flower field, we see Towa leaving flowers for Setsuna. She tells her she ran out of money and could only get those flowers that bear her name. At the same time, she remembers what she told her about the truth of the world, to look for Bahamut, so she mentions that she had planned to leave the game after defeating Weserman, but leaves smiling since she plans to go look for him. In a scene change, we see Lycaon and a message saying a new saga begins called Wolfgang, Be Ambitious. On the other hand, we learn that Katsuo in real life is named Kei Uomi. He receives a message from Sunraku who tells him to check the content of Inventoria immediately, so he logs in. Then we see the three gathered at the usual bar. There, Rakuro excitedly asks if they saw the collection inside the inventory, and thinks that with that, they could defeat all the players in the game. Katsuo thinks the same and knows that the game balance would change if they fought with that. But Towa tells them that before meeting, she checked several things in that storage space, and comments that for now they only serve as display items and have no value beyond that. Those tactical machines and specialized armors need a non-conventional item called Ether Reactor as a power source. And she has never heard of that item, so they have no idea where to get it. At that moment, Katsuo takes out an object and says he has an ether reactor, so they ask him where he got it, and he replies that it was when they fought Weserman's horse, and they gave it to him as a reward. But not everything is good, because he says the reactor is damaged. He tried to go to the smiths to repair it, but they threw him out when they saw it and told him they couldn't repair a strange artifact they didn't know. Towa comments that it is a tool from the era of the Divines and they need a special smith, and in the end they ran out of clues. Then Rakuro says he knows someone who could repair it, although he's not sure if they can. Also, since it's from his special scenario, it would be complicated to bring them, so he asks Katsuo to give him the item. He agrees on the condition that Rakuro tells him the conditions to access the special scenario he hides. Towa, on her side, thinks that information about those special things has a very high value in the game, so it won't be easy to share it with him, and even less without a benefit. Then Rakuro tells her that the conditions were not clearly shown on the screen, so he can only describe the circumstances, and both are surprised because he's going to tell them, and he says he actually didn't want to, but someone has to give in, and he starts his explanation. It turns out that when he was level 20, he randomly met Lycaon, faced him for 5 minutes without taking damage, and gave him several critical hits with Vorpal weapons, and that's how it happened. Because of that, Katsuo gets annoyed because that's useless to him, but lets him keep the reactor. After that, Towa asks him to return what he was holding for her, and it was something she gave him before going to fight the Ashura Kai, so he returns the Golden Scale, and she explains that it is an item from an NPC organization called Golden Scale, and is a high-class item within the Shangri-La universe, which in theory can give power greater than a special monster, although that would be worth more than the wealth of a country. Also, she was ready to sell the Inventoria key, but it's impossible to remove once equipped, and as for the scale, she says she couldn't lose it, and that's why she washed it. She used a trick to keep her things after receiving punishment, since the punishment consists of items passing to the player who kills a PK, and they must pay a fine equivalent to their karma points. Because when a PK is killed, that player automatically sells the items in their warehouse to pay the fine with that money, so she has to protect it by washing it. But it's not enough just to give the item to someone else, because the system tracks history and also confiscates it. But the case with the scale is that it belongs to the Golden Scale organization and is not hers. Yet she could recover some things, so she tells the scale to take the past and returns compensation for the offering. Then 2 items appear, which were her reward for defeating Weserman. Apparently each of them got a different item, and in her case it was the Past Prayers brooch, and the same tome given to Rakuro. Then Towa offered both items to the scale, so the rights of both passed to the scale, and that's why they couldn't be confiscated. Also, she only had to pay with her past in the form of 40 levels. But she doesn't mind as long as she can keep that brooch. She also left her main weapon as collateral when taking the scale, and it became the property of the Golden Scale, so it's safe too. Towa's fine was a total of 500 million, and thanks to the battle against Weserman, she discovered that special monsters are worth a lot of money, so she has a proposal and tells them to form a clan. After that, they play rock, paper, scissors, and Towa loses, so she will be the guild leader. As the guild leader, the first task is to choose the clan name, and after thinking about several, they choose the Wolf Band. And when they are about to choose the emblem, a player enters who is surprised because the bar is practically empty and tells the 3 that he is looking for the trio announced recently about Weserman's defeat, and seeing their IDs, he realizes they are them, so they run away. Then Katsuo says it was a good time to end the meeting anyway, since he has to recover the levels he lost in battle. Towa will return the scale and recover her weapon, and Rakuro will take care of the reactor matter. The player decides to follow Sunraku, and he enters an alley and tells Elem to open the portal. But before entering, he remembers he didn't return the sword to Towa and says he will do it later. Then we see the other player thinks he has him trapped, but when he arrives at the alley, realizes he's not there. After that, we see Rakuro goes to the skill garden because Vash is not there and no one has seen him since he met with him. So he goes to Elki and she offers him a secret skill, but he says he has no money. Then he goes to Balak and she says she can't do anything with the reactor and only a wise craftsman can. And besides her father, she doesn't know anyone who can fix it. He thinks there's nothing to do and will focus on developing his skills first. But he gets an idea and tells Belak that if there is no smith, wise craftsman, then they have to train one. And she replies that he's underestimating her profession because it's not something easy to achieve. But Rakuro says someday he'll have to go through it, and that day is now. He is sure he will succeed and he will help however he can. Thanks to this, Belak accepts his proposal, so Sunraku and Elem get excited and start their training plan. After this, we learn that to become a wise artisan, two things are needed. The first is an antiquity from the era of the divine, a legacy weapon, and the second is a magical power rabbit unit. But neither of the two is easy to obtain. At that moment, Rakuro thinks he has a legacy weapon, so he teleports to Inventoria and then returns with Wezerman's sword. Thanks to that, Belak is surprised, and he tells her he earned it when he defeated Wezerman. While Belak inspects the sword, she notices it is called Herald, and that it is indeed a legacy weapon, but Rakuro tells her it is not functional because it needs the ether reactor repaired first. After that, the rabbit takes her hammer and tells him that to become a wise artisan, an active weapon is needed with the purpose of learning the techniques of the divine. But really, it is enough that it has intact parts to understand how it works, and if it is in perfect condition, without complaints. So she says it is time to disassemble it, but Rakuro stops her and explains that his companions must give permission for her to disassemble it, since it was stored in the Inventoria space, and that space is shared by the three, so everything kept there is shared, and all three have ownership rights over those items. Because of this, Belak becomes discouraged and suggests they look for the magical power control unit. Then she pulls out a map and says that according to her father, it is found along the path of past glories. To her surprise, the map also marks the location of the arid dark ruins, the place where she must get items for Vash, so she plans to go immediately. But then Belak asks for a moment because she is preparing to accompany them, and Rakuro wonders how he will leave with two rabbits without drawing attention, so he tells Belak she will have to transform into a human, but she says she cannot do that. However, she has another option, so she removes the bandages from her chest and her hair starts to fluff up, so he carries her like a coat. Before leaving, he updates his respawn point, and then they head to Forfolkshire, arriving at the Canyon of the Ancient Souls, a desolate wasteland that resulted from a great battle, now a hotbed of undead with a lot of miasma. Because of that, before entering, Rakuro goes to a tool shop, since to avoid the miasma, they must have a priest or tools imbued with holy power, but those objects are expensive. Luckily, he only needs equipment for them, so later we see him at the Canyon of Souls. There, we are reminded that Rakuro is immune thanks to Lycaon's curse. But then, a zombie wyvern approaches, and upon noticing the marks, it flees terrified. The worst part is that he wants to test his new skills, but cannot, and just at that moment, a strange enemy appears. A Dullahan general who takes a defensive stance, and Rakuro draws his weapons and says it is time to hunt. He is happy because he will be able to test his new abilities. He dodges the first strike and blocks the other while keeping distance. He deduces that since it didn't flee, its level is higher than his. However, he doesn't feel this monster is a big threat and wonders if it is because he fought Wezerman. Therefore, he decides to first knock it off the horse. Running to its back and using his sword attack, the monster blocks but ends up falling off the horse. Meanwhile, Belak dips her hammer in holy water and sends it flying. After that, Sunraku jumps to finish it, but the general recovers and attacks him. Rakuro dodges using a dagger for support and says 30 seconds have passed and his ignition warm-up phase is over, so now he uses ignition at full power. Also, since his luck increased, he uses his Hand of Fortune to hit it. Then Elem shoots a magic burst, and Belak lights her hammer, uses her Titanic Burst skill, and sends it flying alongside the horse. After defeating the general, we see it drops its sword called Decapitator, which grants a damage bonus to head-targeted attacks both against the living and the dead. However, Rakuro doesn't like it much and thinks about selling it, but Belak asks for the weapon to examine it, analyzes it, and says that Sword is not dead yet, and she will make it like new. Then he inspects its stats and realizes they are very high. It's also level 98, and now he understands why it's so strong. She tells him that strength was gained forging steel, and says she has more experience fighting than him, and then they decide to go straight to the boss. While going, Rakuro comments that unlike other areas, he has the impression that this map is too simple and is just walking straight ahead and the enemies are easy. But then we see something big moving behind a rock. After this, they continue walking, and Rakuro asks what might be above that fog, mentioning that climbing doesn't seem difficult and that going over might even be faster. But Belak tells him he can take that path if he wants to die, but she won't. Elim, on the other hand, says that terrifying monsters called crystal scorpions lurk above the canyon. Belak says even she can't handle them because they attack in packs, and encountering them would mean the end. Because of this, Rakuro is amazed, since it means they are monsters above level 100, and wonders if it's a shortcut for those desperate to get stronger, and then he notices a shadow. He thinks it was his imagination, but upon hearing this, the rabbits get worried and tell him to keep going. He does so, but keeps thinking about the scorpions and mentions he will go after them someday. They continue until they reach a place with denser miasma and assume the boss is there, but they don't see it and wonder if someone has beaten them to it or if they have to fight inside, so they decide to enter. There they find the area boss, a singing lich. Seeing it, Rakuro assumes it's some kind of wizard skeleton and lunges before it can start chanting curses, but Belak tells him to wait, though he doesn't listen and strikes. But his blow passes through without harm. Belak hits it and says physical attacks don't work without the sacred element, and he worries since he has nothing that grants that element. Then the monster attacks by throwing miasma, and he realizes it is the source of the canyon's miasma. Thanks to that attack, he takes 2 damage, but then nothing happens, so he assumes it's due to his marks and that status effects are nullified, and he realizes something: if neither his nor its attacks work, it will be a very long fight, and wonders what they will do. Belak scolds him because she told him to prepare well, and says she'll buy them time and will show how she can save him from this. After this, Rakuro begins attacking along with Elim, as she's the only one who can damage it. She prepares, uses her magic blade, and manages to hurt it. Thanks to that, the monster counterattacks, and Rakuro begins dodging again, asking Belak how much time she needs, and she replies to keep going since she won't be ready so soon. We then see her polishing with holy water the sword they got from the general, commenting that the sword isn't dead yet. Meanwhile, Rakuro continues dodging and attacking alongside Elim. Meanwhile, the Lich gets angry and clones its body into 7 copies, each wielding a different weapon, so he keeps dodging and knows beating it won't be easy. At that moment, Belak gives the sword, and as she does, holy water drips from it and falls on the Liches, who back off for a moment. Rakuro is impressed it's the same rusty sword, but Belak says she has no furnace or anvil, so it's not excellent work, just polished with holy water. Still, it guarantees its strength and can harm the Lich. However, it's very fragile and can only be wielded 8 times before breaking. Then the Liches start gathering as if singing, which gives him chills, so he asks Belak to climb on him and keeps dodging since he still has no plan. He decides to investigate if the copies have any tricks, dodges their attacks, and makes them hit each other, noticing the main body shuddered, so he assumes they share HP with the copies. Also, since it shuddered, it means they don't have much HP, so he has a plan and tells it to the rabbits. Then he throws her very hard into the air, and she realizes the copies attack him, but he dodges and says soon 10 minutes will have passed, and he will use the limit buff. At the same time, he asks Elim to clear them away with her magic blades since he will use his buff skill, which only activates after 10 minutes and he hasn't been able to try until now. Then he activates Overheating, a skill that raises all parameters for 5 minutes, but then halves them. He also activates Nitro Gain, which makes the player take 20% of total HP as damage, but increases strength and agility. It can be used every second, and he uses it until he's left with 4 HP. Thanks to that, he can use the Climax boost, while Elim uses her magic to open the path. So he decides to attack the Archer Lich first, and using his super jump, propels himself, takes advantage of the sword's effect, and beheads it with 1 strike. He realizes that with his high critical rate and all buffs, he can finish a copy with 1 sword strike. Now he goes for the Axe Lich, and there are still 5 copies left. But he only has 7 sword strikes left, which is why Elim covers him to finish the fight before 5 minutes, since after Overheating ends, he won't be able to defeat copies in 1 hit. After defeating the Axe copy, Belak watches him fight and is surprised that despite everything against him, he can still counterattack and hunt all clones. So she thinks he's not just bragging about beating special monsters and is determined to help with his plans. Once all copies are eliminated, we see he only has 2 attacks left. So he throws Elim like he did with Belak. She attacks from the air and breaks the defense, and Rakuro takes advantage of the moment to use the brilliant Piercer skill, and as expected, can't finish the original with 1 attack. Therefore, the sword gets stuck in its neck, and Belak tells him he's held up well but must do it only 1 more time. So he grabs Belak, propels himself with his jump so she can strike the sword with her hammer, and together, they manage to finish the Lich. After this, they celebrate. Elim falls on Rakuro's head, leaving him with 1 HP, so he scolds her. Then Belak grabs the Decapitator sword and feels relieved it can still be repaired, but not here. So she tells Sunraku they must go to 8 Dold. Meanwhile, we see the Lich left a magic item, but it's not for him, and he notices the fog starts to fade after defeating the boss. After this, they reach the city, update the reference point, and also connect the portal with Rabatuza. There they split up, since Belak wants to return to her world to repair the sword, and Rakuro tells Elim to go back too, since he wants to explore the city and carrying a rabbit scarf will make him stand out. But she finds that suspicious, though he reassures her, saying he will buy her carrots, and she agrees but warns him not to do anything foolish. He says he won't, and as the Rabatuza portal closes, he returns to the Canyon of Ancient Souls and prepares to fight the Crystal Scorpions. While climbing, he wonders what the Scorpions will be like, and says it would be rude of him to leave without paying his respects. Besides, he can't ignore an unexplored area. Upon reaching the top, he begins to explore the nest of the crystal spikes, and the first thing he notices is that it is quite difficult to traverse, as he can't comfortably place his feet. At the same time, he wonders what kind of monsters the crystal scorpions are. And at that moment, one appears behind him, but thanks to his reflexes, he dodges it and realizes it is the type of monster that camouflages with the environment. He keeps attacking it, and Rakuro dodges as best he can, shouting at it, asking if it only knows how to throw itself around wildly. Still, he thinks it just wanted to get to know him, since he doesn't believe it can defeat him at his current level. So his mission will be to take a quick look around and gather any rare materials he sees. But just then more scorpions appear and surround him. There he remembers what Belak told him, and seeing the situation he's in, he realizes it will be his end. On the other hand, we see Elim bored, wondering when Rakuro will return. Just at that moment, he appears angry from losing, and asks Elim to open the portal again, and upon realizing he went to fight the scorpions, she scolds him because they warned him it was dangerous, but Sunraku gives her a carrot and she calms down. After this, she opens the portal and he returns to the scorpions, but this time tries to be stealthy, since he saw something that caught his attention and finds it. So he plans to take a sample of the material, assuming it is valuable since it can only be obtained in that area. Then he takes out a pickaxe, and when he goes to strike the first blow, it makes noise and the scorpions appear, but he does not intend to give up, so he activates all his buffs to try to gather some. But then we see he appears again where Elim is, who is surprised because he returned very quickly. Rakuro, on his side, can't believe they are so strong and fast, besides having the numerical advantage and camouflaging with the environment, and Elim tells him they warned him, but he shows her the material he got, which is a hard lapis from Aronkaleth, containing very dense magical power, and its bright blue tones evoke memories of the earth. Sunraku doesn't know what it's for, but thinks it must have high value, and says he'll check it later on the strategy page. Then he rests, and while doing so, thinks that the scorpions' bodies could drop a good item, and plans to return to check. So he goes back to the place, and this time provokes the scorpions, but when surrounded and attacked, he jumps, and they hurt each other, then wait for him to fall to finish him off. But he teleports to Inventoria, and the scorpions are left confused. Thanks to this, Rakuro laughs because his plan worked, and it came to him from seeing Elim using an item, as he thought of using Inventoria as if he were an item or weapon to create a safe area anytime, and depending on how he uses it, he realizes Inventoria could be an invincible object. He waits a moment, and when he leaves, he finds many items. And there he realizes it's as he thought. The scorpions left, so he picks everything up and now has materials from super powerful monsters, then repeats it a few more times to surprise Belak with those materials. However, there is a weight limit that the player can carry, and exceeding it affects mobility. But thanks to Inventoria's storage space, that does not apply to him. So taking advantage of that, he can obtain many materials. After a while, he realizes his MP is almost gone and he can only use Inventoria one more time. At that moment, he notices he hasn't collected any stingers yet and can't leave without taking the scorpion's most important part, so he assumes it must be the hardest part and won't fall easily, meaning the stinger is an item of the highest rarity and that forces him to get it no matter the cost. But achieving it won't be easy, so he swears by his title as champion of trash games that he will get it, activates all his buffs and attacks several times. But it doesn't hurt. Then he appears among the other scorpions and decides to use them as he plans to guide their attack to hit a stinger, manages to land on one and attracts the attacks of the others, and at the last second teleports to Inventoria, but this time doesn't wait and returns quickly. Seeing that a crack formed, he attacks and manages to break it, but the item moves too far away and he can't catch it, so it falls among the scorpions and they kill it. After this, he reappears crying and tells Elim that the stinger isn't indestructible and it's possible to get it, so at least he knows that. Also, he was very close to getting it, but luck didn't help, so he's fed up and doesn't want to see scorpions for a while. Seeing him like that, Elim says he has lost his mind, but he tells her there's only one thing that can calm him, so he will go with Bilak and show off his materials, so she congratulates him and understands how extraordinary he is, also asking Elim to accompany him. In a scene change, we see Bilak get excited upon seeing the materials Rakuro brought her, and he feels proud. While she is checking everything, Elim says it's a shame he didn't get the crystal stinger, but Rakuro silences her with a carrot in his mouth and asks Bilak what weapons can be made with those materials, but she completely ignores him because a gem caught her attention, which is different from the others. Then she shouts at him and tells him that from the parts of the crystal scorpions, weapons can be made, but it's better to turn the gems into accessories. However, that's not the work of a blacksmith, but of a jeweler. Then she explains that there are objects that produce effects when embedded in something, and jewelers specialize in incorporating gems into items. Because of this, Rakuro becomes interested and asks if there is a jeweler in Rabatuza, and Bilak says no. Thanks to that, Sunraku gets annoyed because he assumes it's complicated work and thinks his materials will be wasted, but Bilak tells him she has a trusted contact, although she hates asking for favors. However, her pride as a blacksmith won't allow such good materials to be wasted, so she calls a very strange cat who introduces himself as the sub-captain of the musketeers with boots, Aramis. After the introduction, the guys mock him and then go straight to the point, so Bilak tells him to ask his jeweler friend Darnyata to prepare some accessories, and she doesn't mean antiques, she wants a masterpiece and shows him the materials. At the same time, Elim says those materials were obtained by Sunraku, so Aramis looks at him and is surprised he has a human body with a bird's head, but Rakuro clarifies he is human, but Bilak mentions he's not a normal human as he has the recognition of Lycaon, defeated the Tomb Guardian, and is her father's disciple. Because of this, the cat apologizes and attacks him by surprise. Rakuro dodges, so he puts away his weapon and says, "It's true, not a lie." And because of that, Bilak starts beating him to make him respect her smithy. After this, the cat tells him they will use all the jewels and says goodbye, guaranteeing that he will receive all the accessories. Kissing Bilak's hand, she wants to hit him with a hammer, but he jumps and teleports away. After this, Rakuro asks how they met, and she says she only forged him a weapon, and Elim says he's much stronger than he appears, but Sunraku knows that because he didn't use all his strength in the attack. Also, Bilak says if they talk about combat skill, Aramis would beat her without hesitation. Because of this, Rakuro has many questions about that new race, but for now plans to sleep, and when he returns, he will continue searching for the Magic Power Management Unit to turn Bilak into a wise craftsman. The next day, he reconnects to continue his path to the ruins, but Elim says she has to tell him something about that. Then we see Bilak beating the cat. He tells her he took her jewel to its destination and came back to support his dear lady, because he heard she was going on a journey, so he will help her. Because of this, Rakuro thinks he's stronger than Bilak, and having a level 90 character with him will ruin the fun. Bilak says she would leave him behind, but will still follow him no matter what, because her king heard about him and wants to support him, since the two kingdoms are allies, also since he is her father's disciple. That makes him more important to others. On top of that, he defeated one of the special monsters, and she says it seems he doesn't yet know he has become very popular. Also, the Kate Sith loved his gems, and although their jewelers are very skilled, they also have a reputation for being thieves, and she told them about his achievements to avoid having the materials stolen, but in return they will have to tolerate them. Because of this, Rakuro asks what else he could cause with his influence, and she replies that Lycaon's marks are like a seal of approval, so he could get a lycanthrope or lizard wife. Besides that, if he's not careful, he could start a war, so he better take responsibility for his actions, or things will quickly get ugly. Then they return to the city, so Elam takes her human form and Rakuro wears his ghost outfit. Since inside, he carries Belok and Aramise who don't stop moving, therefore he knows his outfit isn't the best. But it's an official game team, and as long as he keeps confidence, no one will suspect anything, or so he thinks, because all other players look at him strangely. Then they pass near a girl, and she stares at him. Elam gets nervous, and he tells her to act normal. Then the girl approaches and asks how she can help him, and with a man's voice, she says she knows that outfit is worn by one of the 3 players who defeated Wezerman, the one who usually wears the bird mask called Sunraku. He knows he's been discovered, but is more surprised by the man's voice. Then she introduces herself as the leader of the guild library, the professor. Her guild is very well known in the game, and Rakuro remembers reading about them while researching. So he asks if the professor has information about his special missions, but he has to get to his destination as soon as possible because he doesn't want the news about Elam and the others to spread. After this, the professor asks if he has felt the distinctive nature of the scenario indicators, which, unlike other games that guide you through events, in Shangri-La the player must search for them because it's a game with a colonizer spirit and he has never seen a game with so much to discover. Then she sends a friend request and tells him what intrigues her most is what occupies the world's core, the 7 Supremes. Thanks to their difficulty, researchers have hit a wall, and when she found out someone eliminated one, she was shocked and asks if he wants to join them in the search for the truth about that world. Then they show all the characters who apparently know about that truth. And on the other hand, we see Lycaon, and here we learn the rematch against him was closer than expected.